going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Deeper Dive presented by Jock Market. 3-game slate. I'm Dave Loughran at Lafayette_D on the Twitters, along with Adam Scher, fresh cut, skin fade, ship my money, DFS. What's cracking, bro?
Not much. Actually had time to get some stuff done today. I think getting my haircut had been on my list of things to do for like a month, and I hadn't gotten around to it. So feels good to, not like have to wear a hat and be disgusting.
Yeah, but you'll wear a hat like 2 days. See, that's what I do. I get my hair cut. I won't wear a hat for 2 days. And then like the next 20 days until I get it cut again, I wear a hat.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of the same way too. Like it'll probably be back shortly.
I should just shave my head at this point because there's real no need for it anymore. But whatever. We're happy to have you guys with us. We got 3 games to hit on. And well, some big contests as always. So I say we just dive right into it. But first off, before we do, Adam, when you look at this slate, same question I ask you to kick off every show. Stars, scrubs, balanced approach, what type, and we don't have to get into the specific value because there's one kind of key injury today that we'll get into in this first game. But is there enough value to make it where you can get some real cheap options in there and build a good lineup with some studs?
Yeah, there's enough value. It's not necessarily the best value. Like there's a lot of guys that I think there's a lot of like cheap options that you can kind of rotate through. I wouldn't say that there's 1 or 2 that I'm like super confident in. There's no Dwayne Dedmon type guy tonight where it's just like, it would be shocking if he fails. But there's just enough guys that are sub 4K that it's going to make it pretty easy to get up to that 10 to 11K range if you want to. And
welcome to the team, Turtle Man 137. Turtle Man, welcome to Team Awesemo, bro. Happy to have you with us. Happy to have all you guys here. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. We're at over 100 already, so I should just say appreciate that out of the gate. We got 631 watching, and what's 100 more, right? Only takes a second. Helps us a ton. You guys know what's up. Helps us combat that YouTube algorithm. The overlords here. We're fighting them tooth and nail every day of the week, and with your help, we'll defeat them, sons of bitches. Soon as this channel you're going to come here, we're going to come here and the channel's not going to exist, Adam. One day we'll come here, the channel will be gone. The overlords will win. But until then, we'll keep fighting. And subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Help us get to 70K. You'll always know when new content's dropping. Oh, and last thing. Hit that join button down below if you want to join the team like Turtle Man 137 did. Happy to have all of you guys joining us, become part of the team, get the custom emojis, the badges, the priority question access, and of course the shout outs like Turtle Man 137 did. All right, let's talk Golden State and Brooklyn. Adam, the Warriors coming into this one in Brooklyn should be a fun game. They're 3-point dogs, 222 total. We have to start with Steph Curry because, again, you know this as well as I do. On these short abbreviated slates, you're always going to have a handful of really good players. You got Curry, you got Harden, you got Durant, you got Paul George, Embiid's out, Leonard's still out, all those guys, but you would have even had more. So we'll kick the slate off with Steph Curry at the top of the player pool.
Yeah, I mean, I think he looks great. I think that the pay up options at the top are all pretty similar to me. Curry, the most expensive, so likely to get the least ownership out of the group. But I think the range of outcomes is pretty similar for these guys. So, I think that guys like Kevin Durant, Paul George are going to be a little bit easier to get into lineups because they have multi-position eligibility. And in George's case, he's guard and forward eligible. But you have Curry getting 24% ownership while those guys are at 35 and 36%. And he's even getting a little bit less ownership than Harden. So I do like paying up for Curry here. I mean, he's got a 31.5% usage rate this year, 30.5% assist percentage. This Brooklyn team has been fine defensively. But one thing that I think is interesting about this slate is pretty much every team on the slate has been good defensively this year. Golden State, the Clippers, the Nets, the Spurs, I think, or Spurs are 13th. So Golden State, the Clippers, the Nets are all top 10 in defensive rating. Jazz are 11th. Spurs are 13th. It's just a slate where, even though it's not the best matchup, I think that it's still relative to the slate. It's a pretty good spot for Curry.
Yeah, his boom bust probability right now and his ownership, we could talk about both of these, but ownership on Curry is not that high on DraftKings, 24%. I guess what I was wondering really is when you look at compared to say Kevin Durant on DK, only $600 cheaper, right? Paul George, only $700 cheaper. They're both north of 10-2, or they're 10-2, 10-3, and then Curry's 10-9. James Harden, 10,600. They're all getting more ownership than Curry today. Does that seem right to you, or is that something we can exploit?
It seems right from like a medium projection standpoint. Like I would expect to get to George or Durant before I get to Curry in a cash lineup. But from a tournament standpoint, I think it's exploitable because realistically, these guys all have the same ceiling. They're all priced about the same. You know, there's a $700 price difference on DraftKings between Curry and George, $600 between him and Durant. It's not nothing, but it's pretty easy to overcome. So where you're getting a lot more ownership going to those guys, I do think it's sort of exploitable where you could potentially just say, okay, you know, I'm going to play a little bit less of them, play a little bit more Curry, and just understand that even though point per dollar wise, those guys project a little bit better, the ceiling is still just massive for Curry, and he can easily just win you a slate.
Do you buy into the Nets defense being legitimately good this year? They're top 8 in defensive rating.
Yeah, I mean, I don't pay like a lot of attention to it, but I know they've played well so far.
Where else are we going here if we're looking at Golden State? And of course, if you haven't yet, you can check our ownership projections out. They are totally free today. If you're not a premium sub, 100% free NBA ownership projections for the main slate. If you want to get in on that action and follow along with us. Dre's actually getting the most ownership of anyone here on DraftKings, at least among the Golden State Warriors. On FanDuel, you've got Curry at 29%, but then guys like Jordan Poole, Green, and Wiggins all pulling 20+%. So let's break down the rest of this Warriors team outside of Curry.
Yeah, I mean, I think Green looks really good. He's been playing around 32 minutes. This is a game, you know, Josh and I talked about this morning. It wouldn't be shocking if Golden State just ran a little bit tighter rotations here with it being Brooklyn, you know, kind of narrative based, but wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world. But even at 32 minutes, Draymond looks pretty good. He's just shy of 1.1 DraftKings points per minute this year. So $6,400 looks pretty good for him. Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins, I think, kind of fall in behind him. Poole 5,900 on DraftKings, Wiggins 6,500. They've both averaged just shy of a fantasy point per minute this year. You're probably getting around 32 minutes from Wiggins, probably 30 to 32 from Poole. So they're okay, but I think Green looks better than either one of them. And then the fifth starter, Kevon Looney, normally not someone that we really talk about, but we mentioned at the top of the show that there's a lot of cheap players that are playable, just not really many that you're going to be really confident in. I think Looney is one of those guys. He's likely to play 18 to 20 minutes. He's around the fantasy point per minute player. You're not expecting any sort of monster game like you got the other day when Draymond was injured and Looney played, I think, 29 minutes and grabbed like 100 rebounds. But at 3,500 on DraftKings on a 3-game slate where the opportunity cost is a lot less, if he gets you 20 to 22 DraftKings points, there's a pretty good chance that really helps you out.
Are there any listen, I know it's a 3-game slate, so I'll be careful with the wording here, but are there any plays you love from Golden State today?
And so I guess one other thing to mention from Golden State with the bench, Steve Kerr has been running a very deep rotation, basically using 11 guys every chance that he gets. The guy that I would be the most confident in would be Andre Iguodala at 3,100. He's not a great fantasy producer, but in competitive games, he's typically been playing 24 minutes recently, and he's only 3,100. So I don't mind using him as value either. Outside of that, you know, in larger field tournaments, if you want to mix in some Gary Payton, some Otto Porter, you know, just hope to get lucky, that's fine. But Iguodala, I think, is the one that looks the best to me. As far as priorities go, I think Draymond is the top one here because, you know, clearly I would rather get the Curry, but from just a roster construction standpoint, I think Draymond's the easiest one to get to. Iguodala probably the second easiest, but you know, clearly Andre Iguodala has his downsides as well.
Yahoo pricing can be crazy sometimes. Just like a general strategy question for you. Is it me, or does it always seem just a little bit easier to go full stars and scrubs on a site like Yahoo?
Wait, what was your question?
I said a bit of a strategy question here. We talk about FanDuel and DraftKings a lot, but is it me, or does it always seem like it's just a little bit easier to go full stars and scrubs on a site like Yahoo, where they've got so many players that are like viable, priced in that $10 to $13 range, no matter the slate?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it typically is just because you get a lot of guys at that like price floor.
What are we doing with Brooklyn on the other side? James Harden, Kevin Durant up top. Harden's pulling a lot of ownership today. I mean, as a matter of fact, among everybody on DraftKings right now, you've got Kevin Durant, with the highest projected ownership on the entire slate. And then James Harden's only 10% behind him, 36 and 26% respectively among Kevin Durant and James Harden. We'll get into Joe Harris shortly because that's actually pretty significant news. We can talk about Patty Mills, but let's kick it off with the two guys here up top.
So, whoops, now I'm on the Yahoo page. You got me messed up. You asked me a question I wasn't expecting.
You didn't have to go to Yahoo. I was just asking you a general question on Yahoo.
Harden and Durant, I think it's kind of site specific for me. Durant's a little bit, they're both obviously fine. They're both in the top 4 projected players on the slate. But for some reason, Durant's less expensive than Harden is on DraftKings. They're likely to play about the same minutes. Durant has averaged about 1/10 of a fantasy point per minute more than Harden this year, and he has multi-position eligibility. So it's really weird to me that he's less expensive on DraftKings. It makes him look, in my opinion, a lot better than Harden, and he is higher owned, as I think he should be. On FanDuel, he's a little bit more expensive than Harden, so I think it's a little bit closer. I still prefer Durant, but there it's kind of more of a coin flip. So on DraftKings, I think Durant's the priority for me.
All right. Well, let's talk about Joe Harris for a second and really get into this, because this is where you're probably going to see some value come in. Although I guess Patty Mills not getting as much ownership as I thought he would. He started the second half after Harris went down on Sunday, who played only 14 minutes, right? Patty Mills comes in, starts the second half, plays 17 minutes, Adam, in the second half. I'm not saying he's going to come out and get 34 minutes, but how many minutes do you project Mills for with Joe Harris out of the lineup today?
I have him at 32. I think that anywhere from like 28 to 36 is probably possible. He played a ton of minutes in the second half last game after Harris got hurt. If you were to just like extrapolate that to a game, a competitive game, he would play like 36 minutes. But we see a lot that when someone gets hurt mid-game, you get like a condensed rotation in the second half. And then in the next game, the coach just kind of evaluated a way to,
because he's kind of caught off guard when you lose a starter. Yeah.
Right. And so like, I'm not going in thinking Mills is going to play 36 minutes, but I do think it's likely he plays 30 to 32. The negative is that he's not a great fantasy producer anyway. He's at 0.74 DraftKings points per minute this year. But for a lot of these additional minutes, he's likely to basically be a zero. He's played 130 minutes or so with Durant and Harden both on the floor this year. He's averaged half a fantasy point per minute over those minutes. If you look at the rotation they used in the second half last game, he had his minutes staggered where he was then playing with the second unit alongside Harden. When he's played with Harden and without Durant this year, he's around 0.7 fantasy points per minute. But it's those minutes where they're both on the floor that, as you would expect, he's kind of useless. So I think that the biggest thing is that you can project him for more minutes, which at 3,800 makes him look like a good value, but he's certainly someone that it wouldn't be surprising if he doesn't really do anything special, because he's obviously not going to be a priority when he's out there with those two guys.
Who's starting?
My guess is that it's the same lineup as usual, but Mills replacing Harris. So Harden, Mills, Brown, Griffin, and Durant.
What if Mills comes off the bench, right? Just, because we've seen some different starting lineups and unpredictable spots. What if Mills comes off the bench, but still gets 30 minutes as a reserve? We saw 31 minutes off the bench last game. Of course, 17 of them were in the starting lineup in the second half, but would that make him more appealing to you in the event that, all right, he's going to still get more minutes, maybe like 5 more minutes than he normally does, but they'll come off the bench and he won't have to play as much alongside Durant and Harden? How much of a difference would that make for you?
It wouldn't make a ton of difference, because Harden and Durant play so many minutes that you kind of can't get too much of an increase in minutes without a lot of it just coming alongside those guys. So I would still prefer to be confident, or more confident, I guess I should say, that he's going to get 30 or so minutes than, sacrifice any level of certainty in his playing time for what is not a huge uptick in production.
So if you're evaluating him by where he's at in terms of value plays today, is he still towards the top, or is he kind of like a middling value option? It seems you're kind of saying that he's not that great, which is totally understandable based on the per minute rates, especially playing alongside Harden and Durant.
I think he's towards the top in terms of medium projection and like value plays that I would be likely to get to in cash games. I think there's a chance he ends up coming in a bit over-owned from just a range of outcome standpoint. I think that we have him projected right now at 20% ownership on DraftKings. I think that is perfectly reasonable. I just wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being one of those guys where we've seen it a lot this year. It seems like ownership in large field tournaments has been like really concentrated in some kind of weird spots where it's kind of like people have gotten really good at plugging in medium projections, but they're not very good at understanding like that they still need to differentiate their lineups. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of those spots where you just end up getting like a crazy amount of Mills, kind of more than we're projecting.
Do you want to get to anything else for Brooklyn?
Yeah, I think the front court is pretty interesting here. Blake Griffin, 4K on DraftKings, 3,900, I believe, on FanDuel at power forward. He hasn't been very good this year, and he's been borderline useless on a lot of slates. But, again, pretty questionable value tonight. He's likely to play 25 or 26 minutes if this game's competitive. So I think he's fine. And then behind him, you have Lamarcus Aldridge averaging about 1.2 DraftKings points per minute. He is probably only going to play 22 or 23 minutes, and he's getting a little bit more expensive. But, on a 3-game slate, if you can get 30 or so fantasy points from him, it's going to be pretty useful.
All right. So top options from this game as we wrap it up.
Durant, Harden, Mills for value, and then Aldridge, Griffin.
Hey, hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. Almost at 300. We got 1,700 people watching. We're like 18 minutes to be exact into the show. Hammer that. Well, let's get us to 500 here. What do I say? 1,700 people watching. I mean, what a better place to be on a Tuesday night. I got to play 2 hockey games tonight. 7:50 and then 9:30. The rink's 45 minutes away. Won't be home till 11. So you know what I'm doing, Jordan? I'm stopping at Wawa. You don't even know what that is because you don't live on the East Coast. And I'm getting the Wawa turkey gobbler, and it'll make all of it worth it. For any of you ever in the Northeast.
I'm reading chat, like not listening at all, and I come back to you talking about turkey gobblers. I was like, all right, well, I guess I didn't miss much.
Have you never had one?
I don't think so.
Oh my God. I don't think they have them in Maryland, but maybe you're Florida, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, any of those states, Connecticut. Just grab one. Next time you're around, it's on me. I'll Venmo you to grab a gobbler. Just don't spend.
There's Wawas like all over the place here. I just haven't.
Oh, in Maryland they have them?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just don't spend it on a $10 crack like Jordan would. All right, let's talk. Was it 10? Wasn't it a 10? Did someone say $10 crack?
I thought it was $2 crack.
Oh, $2. You're right. Yeah, $2 bag of crack. So don't spend it on a hit of crack. All right, Philadelphia and Utah. Before we get to that, though, shout out to our sponsor, Jock Market, JOCK space MKT. If you haven't checked it out yet, or you don't know what it is, they've turned fantasy sports into a stock exchange. You can make money down to the hour, the minute, down to every second of every single game, no matter when it is. You can buy and sell shares of players in real time for real money and get a $50 bonus when you sign up and deposit using the promo code Awesemo. So all of that is cool, right? But what makes it unique, what makes it different is the fact that there's a pregame IPO period where you can pick up shares of your favorite players, right? So you're picking players up during this IPO period based on the research. Maybe you watched the NBA strategy show. Maybe you read Adam's deep dive article, which is free every day of the week. Check that out right on the homepage. Best article you're going to find hands down. Sorry, Jock Market, back to you. And there's essentially no reason you shouldn't be taking advantage of this. You can use OddsShopper in conjunction with it, looking at props, looking at projections, our projections, which are technically free over there, all of that to hit on good IPO plays. And then once you have them, you can sell them, you can buy more, you can hold on to them throughout the game, sell them before, buy more, whatever you want to do. And the best part is with the first market guarantee over at Jock Market, if you're a new user and you do not profit on your first cash market, you'll be refunded up to $100. Boom. Simple as that. So you get the $50 deposit bonus when you sign up using the promo code Awesemo. And if you don't cash in your first time in the market, up to $100 refund. Go to Jock Market in the App Store and the Google Play Store, download it, and check out all of our free Jock Market IPO projections at awesemo.com to help you out. And of course, all of our player prop tools, OddsShopper, all of that stuff to get you where you need to go. It's Jock Market, JOCKMKT. We'll see you over there. All right, let's talk Philadelphia and Utah. I'm on Utah -8, Adam. I think they're -10 now. I just don't see, and a 216 total, by the way, I just don't see this matchup being even remotely easy for the 76ers. Good rim protection, good rebounding. They haven't seen a ton of that lately. Good perimeter defense. They do not allow 3-pointers. They make it tough for ball movement in the half court. Like it feels like, especially since Embiid is out, this feels like the toughest matchup they've run into.
Yeah, this matchup is really scary to me, but it's also a 3-game slate. And I do think, I mentioned it earlier, but there's a tendency, I think, to really focus on how difficult this matchup is against Utah in Utah. But, again, you have two of the most efficient defenses in the league on this slate in Golden State and the Clippers. You have another top 10 one in the Nets. There's not really much that's easy from a defensive standpoint. Not to say that those games are necessarily less appealing. Like Golden State plays at a really fast pace, even though they're good defensively. But I do think that you have to keep in mind that there's a lot of, but the defense is good on this slate. And so Philadelphia does have the lowest implied total at 103, but you do still have Embiid out. You do still have upside for these guys. But I agree with you. It's a really risky spot just going into Utah as 10-point dogs. It wouldn't be surprising at all if they just kind of get run out of the gym.
Yeah. And yeah, you're absolutely right in the sense that we don't have many alternative options on this slate. There's still no Joel Embiid. So that usage is going to be concentrated between a few players, but you do run into a situation, Adam, and I'd love to hear your take on this, where once Embiid has been out long enough and Simmons obviously hasn't played at all this season, you start to look at this and say, well, okay, now this team is priced like a team that never had Joel Embiid, right? Like obviously Andre Drummond, you would probably, this is a tough matchup and he's come back down to earth. His minutes have been curtailed a bit lately, but maybe he could be a little more expensive. But for the most part, you're paying for these guys like they're on a team that never had Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons. So how do you come to terms with that when you're going through them and fitting them in the lineups?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of at that point where they are, for the most part, especially on DraftKings. On FanDuel, the pricing's a little bit softer on the Sixers, but on DraftKings, I think we're at the point where they're priced correctly for their medium projection. There's still a lot of upside because of the increased opportunities that you get without Embiid, but we're past the point of, just plug in Andre Drummond and move on, or just plug in Tobias Harris and move on. There's still a really high ceiling. Andre Drummond can still go absolutely nuts and get you 50 plus fantasy points. He's still a very good fantasy producer, but he is priced up to 8,700. He's $1,000 more expensive than Gobert on the other side of this game, who is one of the best plays on the slate. So more of a tournament play. Same goes for Tobias Harris. I think he's more of a priority on FanDuel at 7,700, but 8,500 on DraftKings. If this game's competitive, there's a good chance Harris beats that salary. He's got around the 30% usage rate without Embiid and Simmons on the floor alongside Curry since last year. He rebounds at a pretty high level. He gets some assists. Josh had a good point this morning that defensively, Utah's willing to give you mid-range looks. You mentioned the good rim protection. You mentioned that they'll take away threes. You could just get a bunch of Tobias Harris mid-range, which is not efficient, but it's still giving him the opportunity to make a lot of baskets. So I think the ceiling is still there, but I'm not going out of my way to get to him on DraftKings in cash games or anything. Maxi's going to play huge minutes, most likely. He's also 7,200. Curry at 5,400 is somewhat interesting to me, but there's other guys in that price range, other guards that I like a little bit more. Furkan Korkmaz, I'm assuming, starts in place of Danny Green. I think he probably plays around 32, 33 minutes. He's okay at 4,600, but again, just sort of a guy. This is a team where I'm not prioritizing anything. I don't know that I'll have a single Sixer in cash. If I do, maybe it's like Korkmaz or something, but I still think they can be useful in tournaments as long as you're getting them at relatively low ownership.
Dude.
What?
Oh man, that one comment got me.
Dude, there's like 800 of them. Which one?
Adam's barber only has feet. Fuck. Oh, it was good. Is Maxey legitimately reasonably priced on this slate? Because he's getting not a lot of ownership. He's playing a ton of minutes though. I don't know. I keep coming back to this because I'm having a tough time with the Sixers. He's played 45, 44, 39, 39, 40, and 43 minutes. Like, I know his per minute production isn't astronomical, but those are some ridiculous minutes. He's playing almost the whole game in some spots.
Yeah, and that's why I think he still is fine in tournaments. You know, there's better guard options if you're just like, if you're looking for cash plays or plays that are safer. There's a lot of better guard options, but at the same time, he's 12% owned. He's likely to play 40 or more minutes if this game's competitive, and he's not afraid to shoot. You know, his usage rate does take a hit playing alongside Harris, but I think the ceiling is still really high for him, but he's a little overpriced for his medium projection, which, you know, is going to make it more difficult to get to him.
So top options from Philly then?
No. Harris on FanDuel.
All right. Let's get into Utah a little bit here. Donovan Mitchell's just been killing it in the steals department lately. Obviously, that's going to bolster your numbers anytime, but he's been like, this is Donovan Mitchell. This is kind of what we know of Donovan Mitchell. You know, he's a clear +1 fantasy point per minute guy, but he's more in the same vein as like, I was going to say De'Aaron Fox from a fantasy output standpoint, but he's struggled. And Lillard at least has a higher ceiling, but you kind of know where I'm going with this. You expect 40, 45 from him each night, but on a 3-game slate against the Philly team that I think a lot of times people just have this assumption of them that defensively they are still very good. Well, they haven't been this season because there's no Ben Simmons, and now you lose Joel Embiid. They're bottom 7 in defensive rating, almost 110 possessions per 40 or 110 points per 100 possessions. How much of a priority is Mitchell today on a slate that has like 4 guys above 10K?
He's a big priority for me. He's getting 27% ownership on DraftKings. I think that's deserved, but he's just at a price he really has been all season where I don't really think he's getting quite the respect that he deserves. He's averaged about 1.3 DraftKings points per minute in the games, well, overall this year, but also in the games that Mike Conley's been active. So it's not like he's just getting a bump from the game or two Conley missed. The only real knock on Mitchell is that a lot of times we see him play like 33 or 34 minutes, even in competitive games, whereas a lot of other expensive players are playing, 37, 38 minutes in those cases. But last game we did see him get 37 minutes. So not that I think that's likely today, but at least, that's possible. But he's just, to put it in context, he's averaging basically the same fantasy points per minute as James Harden, and he's $2,000 less expensive. Again, I think Harden plays more minutes tonight. I'm not saying that they're equal plays, but I do think that Mitchell's salary is just cheaper than it should be.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, this is not a tough matchup. It's not going to be like a 1-for-1 guarding him situation, but I just don't know who in this backcourt, like Adam, who in this backcourt worries you in terms of their defensive acumen. It's certainly not Seth Curry or Korkmaz or Maxey. Like I just don't really see anyone, not to mention on drives to the rack. Like, sure, Drummond's a good rebounder and he'll grab some steals and a block along the way, but he's not a great rim protector. So it just overall feels like a phenomenal matchup for Donovan Mitchell. What does it do for guys like Mike Conley here at the point guard position?
Yeah, I mean, I think beyond Mitchell and Gobert, it's more like secondary options for me. Conley's around the fantasy point per minute player. He's likely to play 29 or 30 minutes. He looks okay. Same can be said for Bojan Bogdanovic, who's likely to play about 30 minutes. He's around a 0.8 to 0.85 fantasy point per minute guy this year. So at 5,500, he's just kind of like a neutral play to me. Jordan Clarkson off the bench. I mentioned it this morning, but I kind of just end up always getting Jordan Clarkson. And I think that'll probably be the case again tonight because we haven't seen him shoot well very often this year. But if he does, he has a path to a lot of minutes. On average, he's playing around 25 minutes per game, but there's essentially 3 guys that he can potentially close over in this lineup because the only guys that you for sure expect to be in the closing lineup if the game's close are Mitchell and Gobert. If Clarkson's playing well, he can take minutes from any of Conley, O'Neal, or Bogdanovic. And he's got about a 30% usage rate in the games he's played with Conley and Mitchell this year. So you just, need him to get hot and he's going to destroy a $5,100 salary at 13% owned. So I like Clarkson quite a bit in tournaments just for the volatility in his game.
What about guys like Jingles, Bogdanovic here on the wing?
Jingles is just really difficult for me to get to. He's been essentially a non-factor this year. He is getting to a point salary wise where like it's scary to me when I don't have him because it's not very difficult for someone to beat a $4,300 salary in 25 minutes, but he only has about a 12% usage rate this year. In the games that both of Mitchell and Conley have played, it's only 10.9%. His assist percentage is 15.3%, which is fine, but it's nothing special. It's not making up for that usage rate. So on a 3-game slate, I think you probably just end up seeing some ownership go to Ingles. Right now we have him at 6%. It's just not a spot I'm really that interested in. I think Bojan Bogdanovic is more interesting to me, but out of the non-Mitchell, Gobert, Conley guys, Clarkson's the one that I want the most exposure to.
Let's talk about Rudy Gobert then. And I actually don't mind talking a little bit about Hassan Whiteside, who on slates like this, anytime you've got a short slate like this, and Hassan Whiteside's getting like 0.0% ownership, and we can talk about just opportunity cost and everything. Let's actually start with him. Is there any upside in saying, all right, he's played his minutes have been erratic. There's no doubt about that. Like 23, 16, 13, 14, 19, 13, 15, 17. But could this game get out of hand? I think the answer is yes. They're 10-point favorites. I'm not, factoring that in, but could Whiteside at this price point, if he gets like 17 minutes, given his track record of elite per minute, or at least above average per minute production, be worth looking at?
He could. I don't think if he plays 16 or 17 minutes, yeah, it's possible he does well. But I think the better argument in favor of Whiteside is that Rudy Gobert is projected to be the third highest owned guy on DraftKings at 32%. And
so a leverage spot, you're saying?
Yeah, and Whiteside's at 3%. And this is not any sort of argument against Rudy Gobert. I think he's one of the best plays on the slate. But they do directly negatively correlate. If Gobert gets in foul trouble, or for whatever reason Whiteside just plays more minutes than we're expecting, Gobert is 100% playing less minutes because they're not playing alongside each other. So, and then, like you were saying, Whiteside's a very good per minute fantasy producer. So it's not a situation where you really have to worry too much about, well, if he gets 21 minutes, does he do well? He almost certainly is doing well if he gets 21 minutes. You just need him to find some path to get there. It's not likely to happen, but on a 3-game slate, getting to high point per minute guys that have to have one thing go wrong with someone ahead of them for them to get more minutes always becomes pretty appealing to me.
Gabriel asked with a super chat. Thanks, Gabriel. Griffin or Hartenstein, FanDuel last man in for a tournament?
Griffin for me.
Okay. Anybody else you want to hit on for the Jazz?
I guess I'll talk about Gobert for a minute, just because he's like, I think he's obvious, so I don't think we need to harp on it, but 7,700 for him is just a really good price tag. He's around 1.25 fantasy points per minute this year, 26.6% rebounding percentage, 17.6% usage rate in the games that Mitchell and Conley have played. He's averaging about 31 minutes per game. That accounts for blowouts. So there's certainly a chance if this game is competitive that he's getting a couple of more minutes. He just stands out as a great option here.
Top options from Utah side:
Mitchell, Gobert, and I really like Clarkson in tournaments.
All right. We got one game to go, and after this, we turn it over to Live Before Lock, so do not go anywhere. Plus, you got the 30-minute post-lock Jock Market Show with Greg Ehrenberg, Matt Savoca dipping his toes back into those NBA waters, so they'll bring you, a good show coming up till 7:30 for this 3-gamer. All right, so, Jordan, let's hit on the Awesemo Hall of Fame. We got our boy T.O. Deck. I don't know if he's in chat right now, but dude just hit 2 monster back-to-back days, 21,000, 13,000. He's been with us forever. He's a ride or die Awesemo guy. So it's time to shout him out, and everybody else who has been winning and tweeting us at Awesemo HOF with that avatar that they've got that you can download at awesemo.com/avatar. Throw it on Yahoo, throw it on DraftKings, throw it on FanDuel. When you finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more, boom. Free subscription, $90 value, all of our tools, projections, ownership, top stack, boom bust, lineup builder, all built by the #1 ranked DFS player out there, all for free for the entire month, not just basketball, every single sport. So let's rip through this and rep that Awesemo avatar and tweet us at Awesemo HOF when you hit that win. We'll be sure to feature you. Our boy T.O. Deck, my first year with Awesemo, first 5-figure takedown. Can't thank you guys enough. Best tools and knowledge, dropping it in the biz. I love all of you. Love you too, bro. 20,600. And then the next day, back-to-back Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football. Impossible to work a 9 to 5 and succeed without these guys. I love this squad. That's why Alex and this crew built those tools, so people like you working a 9 to 5 can still be profitable. So awesome, man. Happy to see that. Much deserved. And then we got Sean's on. Did Oh, okay. That's DK says my account is missing 956,000. Please fix it your earliest convenience. Thanks in advance. Boom, $43,570. Sean's hot, man. I love seeing him on here. He's behind the scenes working on all of these tools as well. Does a phenomenal job. And the guy's been a fixture in the industry, winning money for a long time. He's also a member of Awesemo. He's also one of us. Landon, I credit all my DFS success to the guys. Thank you for your hard work. Before I started using your advice, I was barely min cashing. Boom. 3 wins right there. I had enough to almost 4K, and we'll wrap it up with Alan's son, Simon. I think. Alan's son. It could be Alan's son. I don't know. But anyway, $400, A-Sun89. Congratulations to all of you. Download the avatar, win a free month of Awesemo Plus, tweet us at Awesemo HOF, and include Adam and myself in there because, well, it's fun to see you guys win. All right, let's wrap this up. We got plenty of time. San Antonio and the Clippers. Oh, and we're at, how many likes are we at? 462, 38 to 500. We're almost there. Just come on, get us over the top. San Antonio, Adam, Jakob Poeltl's been out for a while. He hasn't played since the beginning of November. So just a heads up that he is still out for this one because he got out of game shape while he was sidelined. We got to start with the Dejante Murray, whose price, he's going to be 10K soon at this rate.
Yeah. And like he's at a price point now where I don't think is really overpriced, but he is getting a little close to some of these other guys, in terms of salary. But at the same time, he's another 1.3 DraftKings point per minute guy. So basically the same level of per minute production that you're getting from Harden, maybe a minute or two less, but also a lot less expensive. So I do still like Murray here. Right now we have him projected at only 17% ownership on DraftKings. I think that, like, for example, if you have a lineup that's kind of chalky and you can get from Donovan Mitchell to Murray, I think that's a perfectly reasonable place to pivot, even though I also really like Mitchell. But Murray's just been really good this year. He's playing big minutes. He's doing everything. He gets a bunch of steals, he rebounds, he gets assists, he scores. So just a really, really good player and not a bad matchup here. I mean, the Clippers are second in defensive rating, but both of these teams are in the top 10 in pace. This should be a game that, has a decent amount of possessions. So even though he's expensive, I do like Murray in tournaments.
I got a Manning $50 super chat coming in hot. Says, Adam, always great info from a GOAT. Great job, guys. You know what Ben and I were talking about on the First Look show today was how odd is it that heaters happen in DFS in the sense that, like, it feels like everybody that wins, not always, but you see so often where you could go on a stretch of just struggling. And then, like you did in a week span with the NBA wins, the NHL, the college basketball, and T.O. Deck, and remember Gene B. Kim and Jordan Burkhart, where you just go on a stretch of like a week where you're unbeatable and every contest you entered, you win. There's nothing that makes sense about it, but it just seems to happen so often. Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense at all. But the swings, it seems like it's always like nothing goes right and then like nothing goes wrong.
Right. I don't know. It's weird, but it seems to happen a lot. And we'll take it whenever you guys are cashing big like that. Love to see it. So among the Spurs, you have Dejante Murray, who's priced up, and then pretty much everyone else is just getting mid-range to value salary here. Not to say that they're all great value, but one guy that is pulling some ownership is going to be Keldon Johnson on this slate, a mid 6K price point. I think that makes sense. He's got an 18.6% boom rating in our boom bust tool, which is top 10 on this slate. Where do you and then we can talk about Drew Eubanks and of course his boom rating, which is top 5 here. So a couple guys pulling and Thaddeus Young are three Spurs are in the top 10 on boom rating on our boom bust tool today.
Yeah, and I think all three of those guys look pretty good. I think you want to pay attention to, if you're getting them in lineups together, particularly Eubanks and Young. But Keldon Johnson's been playing big minutes recently, outside of blowouts / foul trouble, or I think there was a game he got injured too. But you have a couple games recently where he's played 38 minutes, even including the blowouts and everything. He's averaging about 34 minutes per game without Poeltl. So I think there's a good chance that if this game's close, you're getting 36 minutes or so from him. His usage rate this year is 23%. He's seen a little bit of an uptick in rebounding percentage without Poeltl, which isn't too surprising. I think at 6K, he's a good play. Like if you were any cheaper, I would think he's one of the best plays on the slate. I think he looks good. And then the Eubanks and Young piece is really interesting to me because I think this is a really difficult matchup to confidently project which one of these guys is in the closing lineup, because it's so difficult to project what the Clippers are going to do. I think if Zubats is in the closing lineup for the Clippers, there's a good chance Eubanks gets a few extra minutes tonight for the Spurs, but I just have no confidence in what the Clippers are going to do. So I think that I don't want Young and Eubanks in the same lineup, but individually they both look good, because if Young is, I think on average, Young plays like 25 minutes or 26 minutes and Eubanks plays 22 or 23. At those projections, they still both look like good options at their salaries. And then that there's the path for a couple more minutes for either one of those guys, which would make them, really, really good. So I think that I don't want either of them in the same lineup, but I mentioned it this morning with Josh. I think this is a perfect example of when you can use like the boost tool in Fantasy Cruncher if you're using that to build your lineups. I don't want to like hard code some rule saying, if I play Drew Eubanks, play Ivica Zubats. That would be a little bit overboard. But I think doing something like if Eubanks plus 5% to Zubats or something, and if Young, then maybe like 5% to Batum, Kennard, Mann, the guys that would get extra minutes if the Clippers close small, makes a lot of sense, because I think there is correlation between who's closing at center for the Spurs and what lineup the Clippers are using.
Man, you mentioned it earlier in the show, but like Golden State Warriors ranked number 1 in defensive rating. Clippers are not far behind them at number 2. So actually they're kind of far behind them because Golden State's just been really good. But how much do you even factor something like that into a slate when it comes to this? And you only have 6 teams to choose from, and one of them is the Sixers against Utah.
How much do I factor in? Like
just the fact that the Clippers do have a stifling defense.
Oh, I mean, it's baked into everything. Like it's baked into the line. It's baked into projections. I'm not doing anything extra to like account for it.
Anybody else for the Spurs you want to hit on?
Yeah. Derek White is finally getting to a price point where I think he's looking decent. He hasn't produced at a really high level this year. He only has a 16.7% usage rate. He's shot pretty poorly compared to last year as well, but the salary is finally dropping. If you're going to get 30 to 32 minutes from him, he looks like an okay value. Not my favorite in that range, but I think he's fine. But then the wings here too, another spot where I want to be setting rules not to really get them together. Doug McDermott has been awful this year, but he has a path to 28 minutes or so if he's playing reasonably well at 3,600. Lonnie Walker played 18 minutes last game. He's averaging about 21 to 22 minutes without Poeltl. He's only 3,700. He's another guy that I think is going to get less ownership than someone like Patty Mills, but gives you not as good a medium projection necessarily, but a similar ceiling. He's only getting 12% ownership. And then at a more expensive price tag, you have Devin Vassell, who has a path to 30 minutes. It's likely he plays 27 or 28. He actually shows up on Odd Shopper in our second best expected win prop too, over 3.5 rebounds. I have him at 4.5. I think that it's just a prop that isn't really adjusting for the fact that even though they're different positions, Vassell is getting more minutes without Poeltl. So I think any of those guys make for good tournament options. I just, would want to mix them into separate lineups, because if Walker's playing really well, he can easily be cutting into minutes of those other guys and vice versa.
One thing I noticed about the value the reason personally, the one spot that I love using Odd Shopper for, because you just mentioned the win rate there on a guy like Devin Vassell, is you've got a lot of these peripheral players, right, for football and basketball, that the prop markets just aren't that sharp on them, right? Like how many people are betting Jawan Johnson unders that I was betting yesterday, like under 16 and a half, under 20 and a half yards, or Devin Vassell, I rebound projections or rebound props. I feel like maybe the inefficiencies that you can find when it comes to these, not no-name players, of course, but guys that there's just not a lot to go off of, that they're not really worried, Adam, about making sure that a Jawan Johnson or Devin Vassell prop is going to be accurate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like with college sports betting, how like if you really know like the math, yes, you can just print money because there's not enough action for people to really care to pay attention to that specific spot. Like
the teams that Ben has me
exactly.
tail and I've never heard of them before. Exactly. Yeah. But over at Odd Shopper, you got an 81% win rate on that. We got him projected for over 4.5 rebounds. Those projections too that are on Odd Shopper are usually behind paywall, but over there they're free. So if you're looking to use them, go for it. Expected win rate, XROI, and of course the best bet that you're going to find it. So that one, Caesars over 3.5 is the best place you're going to find it. A couple clicks and you're on your way. You'll love this site. I'm telling you, if you bet, it's free. I promise you'll love it. And I don't just say that because it's part of Awesemo. I say it because I use it legitimately every day. One of the first things I do is sort by X win and XROI to pull up some bets, and many that I haven't even thought about. So check it out, oddshopper.com, and go to shop NBA, shop NFL, whichever one you want. Let's talk about the LA Clippers here, and then we'll turn it over to Greg and Matt Savoca. Paul George, a lot of ownership coming in on George today. Are you with that at his price point, being one of the highest priced guys?
Yeah, I think he looks really good here. He's guard forward eligible on DraftKings, which makes it even easier to get him in the lineups. He's the cheapest of the price of the expensive guys. Not that that makes a huge difference, but there's going to be some lineups where it will. He's averaging about 1.4 DraftKings points per minute this year, which is just in line. It's in line with the rest of that group. So I think George looks like a really good option.
All right. What did I want to say? Can't even remember what I was going to say. I thought it was important. Must not have been that important. Whatever. I'll get there. Jordan, what was I gonna do? What's on the agenda? You don't remember? All right, fine, fair enough. Clippers, though, 7.5 point favorites here. You got the George ownership, and then you got Reggie Jackson pulling significant ownership himself. I think there's a pretty reasonable price point. Before we talk Jackson, anybody else here? Are you projecting Terence Mann to be in?
Yeah, I have him in right now. Before I do that, there's a question in chat that's going to just be easier to answer. Dave asked if we would add Lonnie Walker to a no more than one group with Eubanks and Thad Young. I would do Eubanks and Thad Young separately, and then do either a max 1 or at most a max 2 with Lonnie Walker, McDermott, and Vassell.
I know what I wanted to do. I had a question from chat, and I'm still getting used to Discord. We moved everything over from Slack to Discord. The Miggy Roberts says, do you think, Adam, that Johnson is a must play in cash on DraftKings? Would you prioritize him over Rudy Gobert?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Not to say that, like, I don't think he's a must. I think there's, enough alternatives in that price range. I think Draymond in there is pretty useful. I think there's some other, ways you can go. Gobert, I think, is pretty damn close to a must in cash.
Okay, so Gobert is what you would consider a cash priority at this point. So,
yeah.
Can we talk?
I'd be really surprised if I somehow didn't end up with Gobert in cash.
Can we talk a bit about? And by the way, thanks for the 600 likes, fellas. We're 6 away, but I mean it's happening at this point. If Terence Mann sits though, to kind of break all of this down, the thing that sucks is it's a 10:30 game. Granted, we should know before the second game. We very likely won't know before the first game. I want to leave no stone unturned here. In the event that he's out, is there anyone that becomes like an excellent value in a spot where you say, all right, I got these players in here. And obviously if you're hand building lineups, make sure that if you have late value guys, they're in your utility or not your main, like point guard, shooting guard, whatever spots, so you can make those swaps and have plenty of options at your disposal. But is there anyone that would jump off the page at you? Like, would Luke Kennard become that guy, as painful as that sounds?
I think Justice Winslow becomes that guy at 3.
Yeah.
The reason being, Josh pointed out this morning, he played 21 minutes 2 games ago. It wasn't by design. A lot of it was garbage time, but he physically played 21 minutes. And Winslow can play essentially every position on the floor. So it's just really easy. And so can so many other guys on the Clippers. It's just really easy for Winslow to find those minutes. So he's someone that I think if Mann is in, I have him at like 12 minutes. But if Mann's out, you could certainly get more minutes for Kennard. I think that Eric Bledsoe's minutes would be a little bit more solidified, but Winslow is my guess at who would pick up a lot of minutes that otherwise wouldn't really be a good option. Would
Winslow become a top option?
I think so. I mean, there's the only negative is, for whatever reason, we could be wrong. Like Amir Coffey ends up being that guy. Like it's kind of the risk that you always run when you're going with bench players, that you haven't seen it actually happen. Like sometimes the coach just disagrees with you. But I mean, based on what we've seen lately, where excluding the second half of the back-to-back, Winslow has been ahead of somebody like Coffey. He's been ahead of, all the other end of the bench guys. We know Winslow can basically play 1 through 5, and it would just make it really easy for the Clippers to use whatever lineups they want. So I think Winslow, and he's productive. He's at 0.92 DraftKings points per minute this year. So I think that Winslow would become a very, very strong option.
Yeah, and I would actually like that more because he doesn't rely solely on you, like only on shooting as a Kennard would, because you're only losing a 14% usage rate for Terence Mann. He's averaging less than 0.8 DraftKings points per minute. The big thing that you'd be losing is his minutes. So whoever's filling those minutes, presumably, they're not getting an extra 30, obviously, but they're going to get a handful of extra minutes. You'd want somebody that can actually contribute in more than just one spot. And I do think while Justice Winslow isn't exactly an elite peripheral getter, in the games where he's gotten some minutes, his peripherals and his stocks, granted a small sample, Adam, and his rebounding even for that matter, hasn't been that bad. With Kennard, you're just hoping he can drain 5, 6 threes.
Yeah, and Kennard, I think, is reasonable regardless. He's 4K. He's averaging about 3/4. Sure. What?
I said, no, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah.
Yeah, he's averaging 3/4 of a fantasy point per minute. If he's hot, he can play 28, 29 minutes. But I think he would get a bump if Mann is out. I just think the minutes mostly would go kind of be spread out, but I think the biggest jump in minutes would be Winslow.
All right. T-Bird, you should, if you move to the East Coast, try the Wawa turkey gobbler because it'll change your life. They're phenomenal. Dude, I eat them when I'm driving though. It's not safe at all. I'll throw napkins in the side thing, like where the handle is on the door. You know what I mean? I'll lay one down on my lap, Adam, and then I'll have the entire wrapper over my lap as I'm trying to drive. But then you get like gravy or cranberry sauce on your hands and you try and make a turn. I got a nice leather steering wheel that just gets gooped up. I mean, it is, that's a wrong word. Gooped up. Not good, man. Not good, but I'll do it tonight. And if I don't make it back tomorrow and you don't see me, you know why. Man dies in tragic turkey gobbler eating driving accident. What else are you doing with the Clippers, including Reggie Jackson?
I'm really just getting to a lot of this team because I think they're very favorably priced here. Reggie Jackson's been playing huge minutes pretty much all season long. You can count on him for like 34 to 36 minutes. He's only 6,100, so he looks like a solid option. Eric Bledsoe, I think, is the best guard in his price range. You have Derek White down there. You have Seth Curry, but to me, Bledsoe stands out. You've seen the playing time ramp up recently. In competitive games, he's been getting mid-30s in minutes. I'm not going quite that extreme on his projection, but even at 30 to 31 minutes, he looks like a very good value. So I like getting there. Batum is fine. Zubats, I think, is fine. Again, I want to pay attention to ownership on Zubats because I don't have a whole lot of confidence at all in how they're going to view this matchup. Like, there's been some spots where I think it's been pretty obvious that Zubats is likely to play more minutes, but this one, I could see it going either way. Like, you look at the Clippers last game, they actually subbed Zubats out and Hartenstein out before the Bulls subbed out Tony Bradley. So they made the choice to go small to close that Chicago game. Wouldn't be surprising at all if you see the same thing happen here. And then the Spurs, go with Thaddeus Young and you just get a small game to close it out. But it also wouldn't be shocking if Zubats is playing well and they give him that extra rotation, in which case he would look fantastic at his price. So again, we talked about the groups on the other side. I think, playing Zubats in tournaments makes sense as long as the ownership is reasonable. Right now he's at 21%, which I think is okay. But again, I think doing something maybe like, using the boost feature to bump up Eubanks on the other side. So if you have Zubats in a lineup, Eubanks projects higher, it makes sense.
Pro tip, you can't cancel someone that does not care. You know what I mean, Adam?
I don't know what that was referring to, but
what?
I don't know what that was.
You must have.
I see it.
Yeah. I won't say it again because then that's just dumb. But yeah, can't cancel someone that doesn't care. So okay, let's go back real quick just to the Zubats thing. How likely do you think it is that they stay big in this lineup or they go small? Because from a minute standpoint, he was really one of those guys that you don't know what it's going to look like until the game starts in terms of his rotations.
I'm not even going to pretend like I know what you're talking about right now.
Why? What happened in chat?
I was just catching up from the last time I looked.
Yeah. Well, I was saying, if you had to guess, do you think the Clippers stay big and Zubac gets additional minutes today? Or like you were talking about with guys like Eubanks and so many other spots, or we're talking about the correlation with over on Cruncher. Is this a spot where you could see Zubac get them going small and Zubac losing considerable minutes?
I basically just am projecting it like average. Zubac has averaged 24 minutes per game this year. Eubanks is at 22 or 23 as a starter. Young is at 25 in those games. I really just don't have any feel one way or the other. If I had to guess, I would guess that you have Thaddeus Young and a small Clippers lineup closing this game. But it wouldn't be shocking if it closed bigger. I just don't have a good feel at all for what they're going to do here. But I would lean toward it closing small if I had to decide.
All right. Hey, we got a promo going that Jordan, we found out about this a good 10 minutes before the show. So it's here. Just got to find it. Our college basketball projections have been crushing because Matt Gajewski just kills it. And the dude is amazing with college sports. Use the promo code Coach K, all one word, all caps, and get your first week of college basketball DFS projections for only $5. They've been crushing. Jordan will throw the link in chat. I think if he has it, there's a link in the description as well. All you have to do to activate it is click that link in the video below or in chat. It's good through the 20th of November if you want to get in on that. And of course, if you want to check out everything else we got, you could do NBA only. You could do every sport. You could do weekly express pass for less than $5 a week. You could do monthly. You want to make a real commitment, a legitimate investment into your life. You could do yearly, annual, one sport, all sports, doesn't matter. Ownership, player projections, top stack tool, lineup builder, the Fantasy Cruncher add-on, which you can now do for a week, which is awesome. All of that stuff that you've seen so many people use to win a whole lot of money playing DFS. But yeah, if you want to get those first week of college basketball projections for $5, use Coach K, all caps, all one word. All right, let's sum this up. Greg and Matt Savoca coming up next. You ain't going to beat this show, fellas, but I dare you to try. And thank you for the 700 likes as well. Just cashing in today, fellas. Likes are currency in the YouTube world. Never forget that. Cowboy Smith X says, with a sort of slate, with such a short slate, who are your favorite contrarian plays on DraftKings? And that's a great question. Do you have any contrarian plays that might make sense today? I think Whiteside's one based on ownership, right?
Yeah, so I just refreshed the ownership and updated 6 minutes ago. So kind of just looking down towards the bottom. For value, Iggy only projected for 7% ownership seems pretty low to me. As far as like competent basketball players, I like Lonnie Walker at 12%. I guess that's another value. Drummond at 16%, I think is a good one. So is Dejante Murray at 16%. Both of those are guys that I think are a little bit overpriced, but I think it's an example too where people are just likely to go a little bit too much by medium projections and not consider that either one of those guys can pretty easily just drop 50 points at 16% owned on a 3-game slate.
All right. Hey, shout out to our boy Jordan Klein. Dead-eyed over there. Just the man is just deep in thought, deep in his work. We appreciate all you. Been a fun show, an interesting one to say the least. And well, we got 3 games. We got Live Before Lock coming up next. Like I said, shout out your boy Jordan Klein in chat. Tell him hello, Klein with K, of course. And we'll see you back here tomorrow on the Awesemo.com deeper dive. And remember, Awesemo promo code gets you $50 deposit bonus over at Jock Market, where if you don't win on your first market, you will get up to $100 refunded. No reason not to do it. Peace.
the Awesemo NBA Live Before Lock show, sponsored by Jock Market, which means that, as per usual on a Tuesday night, we're not only going to be going for the next hour, we're also going to be sticking around for 30 minutes after the slate locks. We're going to be talking about Jock Market and whatever's happening in the games. Any questions you guys have at that point in time, we will be answering. And who knows, maybe there'll be some weird lineups or late scratch that happens in the last 30 minutes. I have a new setup here, so I'll be able to watch the game while I'm doing the show. So maybe that'll also help me be able to react to whatever's happening in the game at the time. And also, I'm joined here by Matt Savoca at Draftaholic over on Twitter. And Matt did his first Live Before Lock show with me the other day, and it was so good we brought him back for another day. It has nothing to do with the fact that Eric Lindquist is away and getting married. It's only because the other show with you went so well, Matt. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, thrilled to be back with you. We're getting in the groove of things. 3-game slate, which means we got to dig in deep to these rotations, try to figure out what the coaches are thinking. But I'm thrilled to chop it up in this final hour before lock, and then getting into the Jock Market game is going to be fun too.
Yeah, and we also have a giveaway going on. So if you guys are not familiar with Odd Shopper, you should be checking out free tool that we have over at Awesemo, and we have projections for all the best player prop lines that are out there, and it's relative to our NBA projections. So whatever we have projected for our NBA stuff, we also run simulations, and then based on those simulations, we're looking at the prop odds and saying, hey, we think this bet has X percentage chance of being over under that number. Here's the expected ROI. Really good way to bet player props. Also, related to that Odd Shopper, I have a tweet up on my Twitter profile. It's pinned right now, my Twitter at DFS. If you respond to that tweet, take a screenshot of your favorite bet over on Odd Shopper, and at the end of the night, whatever bet wins, I'm going to be picking one of the winning bets, and somebody's going to be getting a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So, free way to get involved with the tools we have over at Awesemo. So, check that out. Check out Odd Shopper, and just reply to the pinned tweet over on my Twitter handle. So, Matt, let's talk about this 3-game slate, and not that much injury news going on here. We've got Joe Harris is out. We've got Terence Mann listed as questionable. So let's start with the Terence Mann news. It's something I don't expect that we're going to be getting during the show, but I think it's important we let people know how we're going to react to this news in a couple of different scenarios. If Terence Mann is in, how is that going to impact our lineups? If he's out, how is it going to impact our lineups? But do you think he's going to play, or are you just unsure?
Yeah, I'm building my lineups right now as he's in, and I do think that there's a couple ways that he, I have him right about the field right now, so I'm not super high or super low on him. So it's really about what happens if anyone gets a minutes boost if he's out. I think you could see a possibility that Bledsoe gets more minutes here. You could also see Luke Kennard come in. We also had Eustace Winslow, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, come out, get over 20 minutes of play recently. So I think you could see that as a possibility here as well. I wouldn't say this is necessarily like priority plays as individuals, but the spot looks really good. So I am getting to a lot of these players, mixing and matching players within lineups tonight.
Yeah, and I think also with the one thing that is so it's a 3-game slate. And one thing that is useful about the Terence Mann piece of news is that we've got 67% of the games start at, about that same time, 10:30, 10 o'clock. So I have Terence Mann in my player pool right now. I'm actually getting to him at a good clip because I want to be able to have some maneuverability to make pivots there. And if he's in, I think he's a good play. He's going to get a little bit overlooked by the field. If he's out, then we're looking at Eric Bledsoe to get more minutes, Reggie Jackson, guys who are already but I would be liking more. We have a super chat here. And another thing also I need to point out, because people bringing up that hair is a big deal in the YouTube chat today. We're talking about Adam's hair. Now we're talking about my hair, when people don't even realize that Adam is the one who cuts my hair. It's information that's been totally not revealed on the YouTube channel. Now the secret is out though. Some super chats here to get to. Brett Kaufman, single entry lineup, high stakes. I assume that this is a DraftKings lineup.
This is just grade his lineup.
Yeah, something like that. And I don't know if Brad wants us to read out every single piece of his lineup. Do you see it in front of you, Matt?
Yeah. It looks fine to me. Yeah, I'm getting to a bunch of these players, and I don't hate it at all.
Let's see. So the Nick Batum piece, I am really only going to like Nick Batum if Terence Mann is out. As of right now, my preference is to roster Terence Mann. We have Nick Batum priced at 5,000 on DK. Terence Mann is at 4,700. I have Terence Mann projected for more fantasy points. So I would rather get to Mann than Batum if Mann is in, that is. But I think it's fine to stick with Batum if Mann ultimately ends up getting ruled out. As for the other pieces in that lineup, yeah, I don't have issues with any of them. Any other real opinions there on Brad's lineup? The only real thing I have to say there is play Terence Mann if he's in. If Terence Mann's out, stick with Nick Batum.
Yeah, I guess. I think the Batum is sort of like the contrarian, doesn't make sense with projections pick. And I'm agreeing with you here. I have half what the field is expected to have at Batum. Honestly, I have a ton of the other players, so I can't really complain about the rest. A ton of Mitchell, ton of Thad, ton of Hartenstein. So I think it looks fine to me with that strange, or contrarian, I should say, pick of Batum, especially if Mann is in.
Yeah, and let's see, where do we currently have Nick Batum's ownership over on DraftKings? It is sitting at, did I spell his name correctly? Because that always makes it difficult to find a play. Okay, here we are. Nick Batum's actually projected for a fair amount of ownership, currently 25.5% over on DraftKings. Terence Mann only at 8.1%. So once again, Terence Mann listed as questionable. A lot of people likely not going to be getting to him just because he has that injury tag. So I'm hoping he's in. I think he'll make for a good contrarian pivot. And let's going over to the Nets for a second. With Joe Harris out today. So overall, the Nets injury report, Joe Harris, that's the new injury. Paul Millsap, he remains out. Nick Clarkson, he remains out. So we've got guys like Blake Griffin, Lamarcus Aldridge picking up a little bit extra minutes. Guys I don't usually love to get to, but a little more viable on a 3-game slate. But which guards do you think really stand out to you with Joe Harris out? And we could open up the guard conversation by talking about the impact of Joe Harris.
Yeah, and we saw Patty Mills come in and play a bunch in the second half once Joe Harris got hurt. And I am getting to a ton of Patty Mills here, 4K on DraftKings, 3,800 on FanDuel, especially comparing salary to expectation. Looks really, really solid. He's the 27th highest salary guard on DraftKings. That's 24th on FanDuel, but he's inside the top 20 in our projections. Got about a 7-minute boost in minutes projected for him based on his last 10 games. That gets him up maybe over 31 minutes, I could say. And, you know, he's a 0.6, 0.7 fantasy point per minute producer, which isn't terrible. So he's definitely in a salary spot and a projected minute spot where you're going to get to him in a lot of lineups as that salary saving option.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to consider too, he's 3,800 on DK, 4,000 on FanDuel. It's a 3-game slate, and we're fairly stretched for value options. And you get to a point where anybody on this slate who's that cheap and is going to get minutes probably becomes viable. And that's really where I stand with Patty Mills. I don't have him projected for a massive amount of fantasy points, right around 21.5, but once again, cheap enough for me to want to get to. And I don't really know that there's, do you see a guard play who's cheap that is a sensible pivot to you in Patty Mills? Because to me, he's kind of the best option by default.
Yeah, it's kind of hard there. Like if you compare projection and salary, he's kind of alone on an island. I mean, we have like Damian Lee possibly as God, I don't like that at all compared to Patty Mills. There's some players with guard forward eligibility, like Joe Ingles, maybe 4,200 on FanDuel compared to Mills, 4K. I don't love it, certainly. There isn't an obvious spot, as you said.
Yeah, and that's why, to me, while it's maybe not obvious from a projection standpoint, I'm getting to Patty Mills more than the rest of these guys, just from a standpoint of he's cheap. He's getting those minutes in place of in place of Josh. By the way, chat today is on fire. We've got a 3-game slate, and I don't know that anybody cares about the basketball game. People just involved in what everybody here looks like. They want to know. Now they want you to remove your hat because now that Adam was on the last show with no hat. How many likes on this show for you to take the hat off?
1,000.
Oh, okay. You know what? The way chat's going, I think you thought you threw out some unreachable number. We're going to hit that 1,000 like mark probably in like 5 seconds now. Because I'm telling you, you would think a male dominated DFS audience that are here to watch fantasy sport, you would think they would care about fantasy sports. No, they care more than anything about what we look like every day when we show up to these shows. So 1,000 likes, we're gonna crush it, and that hat's coming off, buddy.
All right, let's do it. I would be thrilled to take my hat off at 1,000 likes. I'll be honest.
There we go.
So
there we go.
Let's do it. Let's see it.
You're taking it off. Somebody in chat's already saying that he's taking his top off when we get to 1,000 likes. Which yeah, let's go. We're having a party here. It's a 3-game NBA slate. We're about to have some fun. You know what? Now
sing it.
And oh man, I have to pull up the YouTube in a separate thing just so I have the like counter in front of me, and I know for sure when we hit that mark, because as soon as we hit 1,000, that hat is coming off. And is there anything crazy we should be expecting over there underneath that, or is it just or is that just gonna be a surprise?
Why don't we keep it a surprise, just
Okay.
in case it's not completely normal.
All right, just in case. And by the way, it appears the likes are exploding. Like when you said when you said 1,000, did you think it was a reachable goal? How long did you think? By the way, we're already there. It took like 5 seconds.
It took 5 seconds. Here we go.
Like,
let's go. I don't give a shit. I mean,
yeah.
I took a shower this morning. Like, we got normal hair here, I think. Like, let's go. Let's have a day.
Yeah, I was hoping that there would be something a little crazier going on, but yeah,
I mean, I definitely got hat head. You
definitely got hat head. I hope that everybody in the audience is thrilled with what they were able to do with their
Professor hat head over here.
Yeah, with their like, and who knows, maybe we get to like 2,000 likes. Jordan Klein will appear on camera. Let's see what his response is to that. No, he's saying no, because Jordan's in the background there with no pants on, and that weird guy who eats food out of his refrigerator in the background. But yeah, so there's no amount of likes that's going to get Jordan Klein on camera. But all right, let's talk about some more of these basketball games and the pay up options at guard, because I do think there are a lot of guys to talk about here, and I'm not really getting to that many of them on DraftKings. FanDuel is a little bit different of a story, but in general, I like to pay up at the forward position more than I like to pay up at the guard. So we've got guys like James Harden, Steph Curry, Donovan Mitchell at the top end of the guard range. Are you getting to any of these guys at a considerable clip?
I'm really not. And it's always scary to play a slate with 3 games and not be in on Steph Curry, because you know how it goes. And especially from just like an entertainment standpoint, there's nothing like Steph Curry going off in a game, especially in one we expect to be super competitive against Brooklyn. But I'm not seeing a ton here. I'm mostly getting value, paying up at the big men position. I do have some Donovan Mitchell, and that's mostly because I'm boosting him in my fantasy crunches. It's just, Corey says I look like I woke up in a button-up onesie. I wish I woke up in a button-up onesie. No,
you do. I mean, you do just look like an aged baby, which I mean, I know all of us are, but you look like you're wearing the same thing. Like you came out of the womb, they put you in that outfit, and you never changed and just grew with you.
Greg put hat on. All right, I'll take that. Aged baby. I can't say I've heard it before, but I kind of get it. I get where you're going.
It's the whole outfit and everything, but yeah, it's by the way, we've got Jordan left the super chat telling me to put. I don't own a single hat. I don't have any hats. There's nothing I could do about it. I would happily do it for the show, but I just don't have a hat. What are we gonna do?
Sorry to pivot away from the hat. I actually like right in the mid tier on DraftKings of my guards that I'm rostering right now. I have Harden, Mitchell, Harden, Curry all in a row. That's my order basically tonight. Is that the same for you?
I'm really Mitchell's my highest priority of all of them, but once again, it's still fairly low priority. I think that Mitchell at his price point is more of a floor play than a ceiling play. His recent games 45, 45, 46, 39, 52, 58 fantasy points. The way I think he lands in the optimal lineup today has less to do with him going out and scoring 60 or 65 fantasy points as much as Curry, Harden, Durant, Paul George. If those guys all score around 50 and just kind of fail to meet salary expectations, then I think Donovan Mitchell has a pretty good chance to land in the optimal lineup. But once again, at the guard position, it is less to do with, Harden obviously has upside. I have Kevin Durant project for more fantasy points today. I prefer getting to Harden. And then same with Steph Curry. I'd rather roster guys like Paul George and Kevin Durant than Steph Curry. And there are some guys in the mid-range of the point guards here that I really like quite a bit.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where the optimizer spits out things one way, and then your gut says a completely different thing. It doesn't feel good to be somewhat lower than the field on those players. But I think from a number standpoint, it does make sense tonight.
Yeah, and then moving down. So here, this is not going to surprise anybody. I like Eric Bledsoe tonight. And by the way, the field is fine with me. People have made fun of me for liking Eric Bledsoe for so long now. Who's laughing now? Who's laughing over these last couple of weeks? Eric Bledsoe, over 30 fantasy points in 4 consecutive games. Nobody's been playing him. Finally, though, we've got a smaller slate, and the masks are jumping on board. If you guys have been making fun of me for playing Eric Bledsoe this year, joke's on you, because now you're right there with me. But Eric Bledsoe, $5,200 over on DK. On FanDuel, he's priced a little more expensive at $6,000. That's a little rich for me, but it's still a price point that I'm getting to. But particularly $5,200, he's one of my most rostered players over on DraftKings. Are you going to try to talk me out of Eric Bledsoe?
I am so not going to try to talk you out of Eric Bledsoe. I've doubled the field expected on Eric Bledsoe right now. I think that even if Terence Mann plays, we could see a minute or two boost for Bledsoe in playing time anyway. And he's been so solid over the last 10 games in a points per minute standpoint. Actually, over the last 5, he's at 1 fantasy points per minute on DraftKings. Really impressive. 9th among all guards. And so then you're talking about a player who's 9th in our projections and 13th in salary on DraftKings. FanDuel, it's a little bit tougher. He's 8th among guards on FanDuel, but still, I think comparing just projection to salary-based expectations, you can still play him. He's just a phenomenal play on DraftKings.
Yep, I'm finding him very difficult to get away from. And then look at the other guys who are priced around him at the guard position. Let me just pull up the pricing really quick. So we've got Eric Bledsoe at 5,200. Once again, been over 30 fantasy points in 4 consecutive games. He's playing a pretty substantial role. The guys around him, we've got Seth Curry at 5,400. We've got Shake Milton 5,000, Jordan Clarkson 5,100, then Devin Vassell 47. I just feel much better about Eric Bledsoe's role than all the guys priced around him. I have him projected way higher. Kind of a necessary evil for me on this slate is going Eric Bledsoe, and hopefully I survive one more day of people not making fun of people not making fun of Eric Bledsoe, because he's continued to deliver for me. So. The other guy that I think we should talk about from the Clippers, though, who's a little bit more expensive, has actually been outperformed by Eric Bledsoe as of late, is Reggie Jackson. So Reggie Jackson, 6,100 over on DK, and then on FanDuel, 6,000. So FanDuel, him and Eric Bledsoe are the exact same price. There, I lean a little bit more towards Reggie Jackson. But on DK, where Reggie Jackson is considerably more expensive, how do you compare him to Bledsoe on DraftKings?
Yeah, I have some Reggie Jackson. I'm just looking it up now. He's my 4th highest owned point guard on DraftKings, so I'm definitely getting to him. And then you're looking at still, I think right now in our projections, he's 6th among all guards. Well, part of that though is that we have a projection of 33 minutes for him. I think that's possible here. He's still a 0.9 or so points per minute player. One thing I'm noticing though, the player impact estimate, 10.2 for him, that's going down. And so I'm fine with the play. I'm letting it go in, but I did set a limit for Bledsoe and Jackson going together. I do think they can kind of take away from each other's production tonight.
Yeah, I think that is a reasonable way to look at it. But it's a 3-game slate. I try not to make my lineups too restrictive, because then I think I'm just kind of capping out some of my best projected lineups. I feel differently on slates where it's, 10 games or something. We were talking about some of the restrictions and rules we're setting in Fantasy Cruncher the other day. I approach 3-game slates differently. It's just kind of, these are my projections. These are the players I think are over on. These are the players I think are under on. Here's how all of that comes out relative to that. I have lineups with Reggie Jackson and Eric Bledsoe together. It's not the end of the world to me. Is it something that you're trying to limit from happening in your lineups, or you're just trying to make sure it doesn't happen altogether?
Just limiting. Yeah, I think we talked about this on our last show, where sometimes we'll set hard and fast rules. Sometimes we can set correlation rules if you're using Fantasy Cruncher. And sometimes I'm just checking it by hand as I go through the lineups.
Yeah, I think that's also a fine way to go about doing it, especially, if you're using Fantasy Cruncher, anybody who's not aware of this, there is a really useful way to look on the left-hand side of the screen where it shows all your player exposures. You could click the magnifying glass, the search bar next to, say, like Eric Bledsoe on the left side of them. It'll show you all the lineups with Eric Bledsoe in them. And then you could see, okay, which ones of these have Reggie Jackson? And you could kind of make some swaps based on that, which is something that I'll use. Even if I'm not exactly hand building, it's kind of still some manual input that's going into that. I think that's a useful way to go about updating some lineups. Amongst the other guards, who are the players that are popping up in your lineups a bunch?
So we've also got Jordan Poole. We haven't mentioned that matchup a lot, but I think Jordan Poole's minutes are pretty locked in. The bench players for the Warriors, I don't know what's going to go on. They're going to play like 81 players off the bench, but I think you could say that Big Four is going to play a ton here. So I'm going to get a ton of Jordan Poole. Beyond that, we've kind of mentioned every other player. Patty Mills obviously is going to be a super, super popular player. I'm not going to go away from that here. Yeah, and then it's Bledsoe, Jackson, and the big three. And then we're talking sub 10% ownership here. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, let me see other guards that I'm getting to. Once again, Terence Mann has guard eligibility on both DraftKings and FanDuel. I really like him. Actually, I'm getting to him more on FanDuel than DraftKings right now. The $4,500 price tag on FanDuel, I think, is really appealing. Once again, we're just waiting for injury update on him. Who knows if that's going to happen, but I think the later in the day it happens, the more likely we are to get lower ownership on him. Any guys that are really low owned that you're taking a flyer on? I think that's kind of relevant to talk about on a 3-game slate. I'll say anybody sub 10% owned at the guard position that you look at is like, hey, this is worth a GPP dart.
Yeah, I have some Vaselli that I'm fine with. I think Devin Vaselli grades out fine. I have some. Yeah, Lonnie Walker's over at 12%. I'm over the field on Lonnie Walker. I think that game is something I've just been targeting in general. And if you look at his underlying metrics, it's been pretty good. He's right around salary-based expectations, a 0.85 or so point per minute player. I don't hate the play, and it's just how it kind of ended up popping, but I'll take some Lonnie Walker this week or tonight as well.
Yep, I think that is not a bad darts play. And by the way, because people are asking about Terence Mann, so here's the latest that we have on Terence Mann. Terence Mann, left ankle sprain, is questionable for Tuesday against the Spurs. Mann tweaked his ankle versus the Bulls on Sunday, but it's not considered serious. However, if he's unable to play, Nicholas Batum will have a higher floor, more of Luke Kennard. That's the RotoWire blurb here. But anyway, it's possible if he doesn't play today, but I'm considering him to be a 50-50 proposition. Is there anything you've read about Terence Mann that makes you think that he's not likely to play? I'm viewing it as 50-50.
I've basically just gone off the shows here at Awesemo today that basically most people are leaning towards, and I haven't seen anything specific. I was reading a chat question from Brian. It says, is the optimal percent a reasonable way to cap exposures to players? Yes, it's a reasonable way to do it. I think it should be a baseline. It should be a starting point. But remember, optimal percentages don't include the variance that we know occurs in a typical game. Now, the variance may not be as big in the NBA as it is in the NFL, but we do need to introduce some sort of randomness, whether you're using the specific randomness function in Fantasy Cruncher. You can do it that way, but ultimately the optimal percentage is not going to get you tournament ready plays if you're just doing exposures that way.
Yeah, and I think something else to consider is what is the ownership of those guys? So it's a totally different scenario if somebody is projected for 20% ownership with 40% chance to land in the optimal lineup versus if somebody's 80% owned with a 40% chance to land in the optimal lineup, because, there's different situations where you're kind of trying to adjust. At least for me, I'm trying to adjust my lineups and the amount of exposure I want to get based on that as well.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'll say, one way I usually use the optimal percentage in our boom bust tool is I'll actually just load that leverage score into Fantasy Cruncher, and depending on the size of the slate or the contest that I'm playing, I will increase what the barrier of leverage score needs to be for that lineup if I need to do it that way. A lot of times I'm doing it by hand though.
Yeah, fair enough. And by the way, we do have another question in our premium Discord channel. I think we actually got a couple, and I'll try to get to all these right now. But Rabashua asked, how would we play the Clippers differently if we knew Mann was out? All right. So for me, if I knew Mann was out, well, for starters, I wouldn't have exposure to him. So that would be something immediately that would impact my life. That's the more obvious one. And as for other guys, like I would be getting to Luke Kennard, I think becomes a really strong value play if there's no Terence Mann. We talked about Nick Batum before. I would expect Nick Batum to pick up a couple extra minutes. So he would become a little bit more of a priority. Something else too with Nick Batum is that he's currently priced similarly to Terence Mann, but I have Terence Mann projected higher. So to me, that would just kind of probably be an easy swap in a lot of my lineups. A lot of the Mann would become Batum, but then Kennard also would stand out as a value play. What do you think would be the most obvious changes to your player pool if Terence Mann is ruled out?
Yeah, I'm actually going to bump Bledsoe in my lineups too. I think that what we could see is even a larger minutes boost for him as well. They just go at their studs. Justice Winslow as well, getting in there. And I beyond what you said there, I think you could just pivot right away on his team. And that makes your life easier, especially when it's the later game on the slate.
Yep. And once again, he's questionable. Are we going to know before lock if he's in or not? Probably not. But there's only there's only 3 games on the slate, 2 in the later spot. So it's going to be easy enough to switch. By the way, it's Devin Vassell, not Devin Vasily. And
Vasily. I butchered it. It happens.
Yeah, it was. But the chat, who is already at our throats today, everything they're hanging on everybody's appearance, everything everybody says. But Devin Vasily, like they think that he's some guy from Italy right off the boat, just popped in and showed up with spaghetti and started shooting 3-pointers. Jets World asking us, who is the cash center on FanDuel today? So overall on FanDuel, I think the answer is Rudy Gobert. I think he's the best center to go to over on FanDuel. Only 7,700, considering his blocks upside in particular over on FanDuel. It's an incorrect price. So 8,300. I mean on FanDuel, he's 7,700 on DK. But answer remains the same. He's going to be the most popular center on FanDuel, and for good reason. So 8,300 Rudy Gobert. He is the cash play to go to at center. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think the only other sort of correct answer is Andre Drummond because he has a similar salary and similar projection. But if you're not going there, you're going to one of the value plays. But I don't think it's worth it here. Like, do you go to Blake Griffin? I don't think so. In cash? No, just play one of those big 2, Andre Drummond or Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, Rudy Gobert, that's my preferred way to go. And then let me see if there's any other questions in the Discord chat. Rabashua on Mann, we may not know at all. Well, if he's in or out, we're gonna know. I doubt we're not gonna find out until after the game starts. But any other thoughts you have on guards? If not, we'll move over to forward.
I think that's about it.
Okay, super chat here from Sean Raza. He's asking, should he get to Bembry in the GPP on FanDuel? So once again, the impact of there being no Joe Harris in the lineup. Bembry is somebody who could potentially pick up the extra run. Not somebody I'm really getting to, though. We don't have him projected for a whole lot of minutes over at Awesemo.com. I don't have Bembry projected for a whole lot of minutes. Is Bembry somebody who I think we could start the forward conversation right here? Is he somebody making it into your lineups?
I mean, he's in my pool, but I'm not getting a ton of him. I'm certainly under the field on him. Just looking at his minutes, he hasn't played more than 20 minutes since the 7th of November, and it was 21 minutes. He had a 24-minute game on the 31st. So, I mean, you could see a boost for him here, but I think his typical minutes, 19, 15, 18, 17 over the last 4. I don't think he's getting past 21, 22 minutes here. So he's got to be super, super efficient in order to be a solid GPP play. If you just compare salary and projection, he's basically right in line. So he's not a bad play. He's just not a priority play either.
All right, we got the Brooklyn Nets starting lineup. It is going to include Patty Mills in place of Joe Harris. So the Nets starting lineup: James Harden, Patty Mills, Kevin Durant, Bruce Brown, Blake Griffin. I think this is what both you and I were expecting. But now that we have Patty Mills confirmed in the starting lineup, is this going to change anything for you?
It's not, because I already have so much Patty Mills. I don't know. It would have been way worse the other way around.
Yeah, it's so that would have been something interesting if, say, like Bembry ended up starting, or I don't even know what else they would have gone to, like Javon Carter or something to defend Steph Curry maybe or something. But yeah, Patty Mills, I was expecting him to start. So for sure, Patty Mills, anybody who's considering Patty Mills in cash games, play him in cash games, in my opinion. He's one of the better viable cheap plays on the slate. Let's talk about the pay up options at forward. But first, guys, today's show is sponsored by Jock Market. If you guys are unfamiliar with Jock Market, this is a totally different way to play daily fantasy sports. This is a stock market, but for athletes. So there's an IPO period. You place bids on the players, and then like stocks, you buy and sell them all throughout the night. So even after the games start, you can still trade players as the games are going on. And most importantly, if you're making your first deposit, use the promo code Awesemo. Get up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit over at Jock Market. And also, just because the slate starts at 7:30 doesn't mean Savoca and I are leaving at 7:30. We're going to be sticking around until 8 p.m. Eastern time, talking about the games that are going on and any kind of late breaking news. And so that section of the show will be sponsored by Jock Market, but it doesn't mean we won't be talking about other sites as well. All right, let's head into the forwards. And to me, I think one of the biggest discussions and talking points on the slate, Kevin Durant versus Paul George. I think these are the two best spend up options on the slate. So do you agree with that? And then number two, which of them do you prefer?
I first of all entirely agree. It's just the way that the slate breaks down. We've already kind of talked about how we're so with the field on the big three guards on this slate, and that's because we're prioritizing these forwards here. I think that you can't get away from Kevin Durant. On DraftKings, I have well over the field, and I'm well over the field on Paul George, just not as substantially as I am on Kevin Durant. And I'm really just taking a stand here. I don't think James Harden is a bad play, but when you see that Kevin Durant's salary is lower on DraftKings, I just think you got to go for it. Paul George he's excellent. If you're talking about a game environment I really want to attack, I really think that last game of the slate is the best one to attack. And George has been playing, really excellently right now. There's just not a concern about minutes, points per minute production. And San Antonio's been basically middle of the pack in defensive rating this season. So they're not bad plays in the slightest. There are really just no warts on their profile at all. It's about, can I fit them in my lineup with the rest of my players?
Yeah, and I mean, to me, it's a yes, especially with Patty Mills as a value play. Most of my lineups have one of either Kevin Durant or Paul George. Maybe even all of them have one or the other. Just because I need to pay up for salary somewhere, and I don't find them that problematic to get to. So Paul George, Kevin Durant, both fairly high priority plays. But I'll ask you this way. If you're playing one cash game lineup, would you go to Kevin Durant or Paul George? The current ownerships for these guys, I'm going to pull up the most recent numbers, give it a refresh, and see where we are at. There was an ownership update 2 minutes ago for anybody listening, and for you also, Matt, if you wanted to check that out. But on DraftKings, the ownership for Kevin Durant, 42%. For Paul George, 36%. These are the two most popular plays on DK right now. Over on FanDuel, Paul George, 46.6%. And then Kevin Durant, 40.1%, $600 price difference between the two of them. So with that information, you can only pay up for Kevin Durant or Paul George in a cash lineup. Who would you choose?
Well, I think the way that my stats break out, I would choose Kevin Durant. But I do have to mention that the actual answer, if you're looking at our Boom Bust tool, changes based on the platform you're playing. Kevin Durant on DraftKings right now comes up in the optimal lineup over 35% of the time. When I see a nearly 2% increase in his chances of being the optimal than every other player, he's probably priority one in DraftKings cash. Paul George happens to be number one in FanDuel cash, and it's an even more substantial gain. It's 41% chance of being in the optimal lineup, and then the next closest player is up right below 36%. When I see that differential, my projections sometimes go out the window, and I'm just going to take the value there, play George in FanDuel and Durant in DraftKings.
Yep, I think that's also a reasonable way to look at it. And, for cash games, if you just kind of want to go with the ownership, which I think is a good break even, especially for cash games, where in tournaments, it's kind of the inverse in this sense. If two players are basically similarly projected in a tournament, I'm going to go towards whoever is lower owned. In cash games, I'm just going to go with whoever's higher owned, because then I feel like I'm evening myself with the field a little bit more. So I think in both senses, ownership could be used as a tiebreaker also. Shout out to Hold'em King 9. Congratulations. That's good stuff you're working on there. And your accomplishments, they never cease to amaze me there. And by the way, also, if you guys have not participated in the giveaway that we're doing over on Twitter, head on over to oddshopper.com, find your favorite player prop bet, take a screenshot of it and reply to the most recent tweet that I sent out, pinned to the top of my profile. And you guys can win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. I'm going to pick out one person who wins their prop bet, and I'm going to be giving them 1 month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And I will be going through some of the prop bets that people sent me a little bit later in the show. We also got a question in our premium Discord chat. There's a player at the guard position that we did not talk about today, and that was Dejante Murray. And Tank Forever asked, what about Murray? People seem to treat him like it's still last season. Murray's been incredible this year. Too expensive for me. He is $9,800 on DK, or no, $9,800 on FanDuel, $9,500 on DK. I'm projected for about 40 fantasy points. I just don't think there's enough upside at that kind of price point. Since we didn't talk about him, we'll just circle back to him for a quick second here. Did you get to Dejante Murray?
Yeah, I have some of him. I'm under the field on him, though. It's a good play. I've already talked about the solid game environment, and there's really not much in his underlying metrics that I look at. His salary-based expectations are right in line with his projection. We have him projected for over 33 minutes tonight, which I think is pretty generous, but it's actually below his 10-game average. So, he's not a bad play by any sense, but the Clippers have had a high defensive rating. It's just not something at 9,800 on FanDuel and 9,500 on DraftKings. It's something I can prioritize. There are just other players, especially the forwards and big men, that I want to prioritize other than Murray.
All right, so let's get back to the forwards. We'll talk about some of the cheaper pay down options. We've gone through the Terence Mann situation, but I want to bring up Luke Kennard, who he also has shooting guard eligibility on DK and on FanDuel. Luke Kennard's positionality, he is also shooting guard, small forward. So Luke Kennard is somebody who I think is viable today for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's a cheap guard who has the ability to score a lot of points fairly quickly. He's a good shooter. But then number two, if Terence Mann is out or limited, then Luke Kennard would be somebody who'd be picking up those extra minutes. So he's certainly more favorable if Terence Mann is out. But I'm getting to Luke Kennard either way. How about you?
I don't actually have a ton of Kennard. I'm actually, it's always nerve-wracking when I have to look him up. I do have some of it. I do have some Kennard as well. I just think sometimes with shooters, like it's the variance of shooting that gets me concerned here. I have some other players that I did end up prioritizing more on FanDuel. Lonnie Walker's the exact same salary. You could go to a player, where's Niang's salary on DraftKings? I just don't have it right in front of me, but I just have prioritized other players here. Looks okay on paper.
Niang's 4,100 on DK, 4,900 on FanDuel.
Okay, so he's a little bit cheaper there. So yeah, it's just not somewhere I like to go. If Mann is out though, I will get more of him in a late swap situation.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I'm already getting to Kennard, and he would become one of my most rostered players in a situation where Terence Mann is out. Then moving down the pricing tier, is there anybody else at the forward position, whether it be small forward or power forward? Actually, I guess we can focus on small forwards now. We've mostly talked about small forwards. Anybody really cheap at the position that you are getting to we haven't talked about?
Yeah, getting a ton of Keldon Johnson. I think he just looks like one of the strongest value plays on the slate. He's been playing at a great clip right now, and I know he's popping in a ton of our optimal lineups. He's fourth among forwards in salary and fourth among forwards in projection on both sites. We have a projection for about a minute and a half more than his 10-game average of 30.7 minutes. And then you're talking about a 0.9, possibly getting up to 1 fantasy point per minute over the last 5 games of Keldon Johnson. The dual position eligibility over on FanDuel makes it a little more exciting for me, but I'm going to get to him on both sites.
Yep. Keldon Johnson is somebody who I like him a whole bunch also. And you look at his recent games, you mentioned the minutes, it's come with production too. He scored over 30 fantasy points now in every game since November 3rd. And once again, on a slate where it's most likely going to be a little bit lower scoring, there aren't that many great points per dollar plays to go to. Keldon Johnson, I have him projected for a little over 31 fantasy points in the mid-range. And that makes him a pretty appealing option to get to at his salary. Also, if we're going to talk about forward, I guess we could rope in Isaiah Hartenstein here. I saw his name come up in the YouTube chat. He's forward eligible on FanDuel. DK, he's only center eligible. But one of my favorite value plays on the slate Isaiah Hartenstein is 3,500 on DK, 4,000 on FanDuel. His minutes have fluctuated a little bit as of late, but he's a really good points per minute producer. And we've seen games where he could go out and score a lot of fantasy points in limited minutes. 2 games ago against the Minnesota Timberwolves, 25 minutes, he scores 39 and a half fantasy points. So there is that kind of upside for him, even in limited minutes. Do you like Isaiah Hartenstein as a value option today?
Yeah, I got a ton of Hartenstein actually. I didn't even realize that he was so high on the list, but on DraftKings, I have right with the field. On FanDuel, I'm a little bit over the field. I I like him as a forward a little bit better. He just grades out a little bit better when he has that forward eligibility. But on a 3-game slate when there's only so many centers, I can get to him there as well. The minutes projection, not spectacular, but on a points per minute play, I've actually been pretty surprised with him. He's second among all forwards on this slate with 1.18 fantasy points per minute this season. That's really solid for him. And again, the San Antonio matchup, just so in defensive rating. I'm not really scared about anything on that side. So especially at 4K, I'm going for it over there.
Yep, I'm in the same boat as you. And anybody else at the forward position that we've not mentioned yet, who's a pivotal play for you?
Just checking here. Not really. I have some Thad Young for sure. I have some Korkmaz, and I'm gonna get to some Bruce Brown as well.
How about I just did an update of my lineups. I had not updated my lineups in a couple of minutes. Just looked at the most recent ownership and did some updates. Blake Griffin's making it into some of my lineups, and I do think there's potential with Joe Harris out. Maybe the Nets have to play a little bit bigger, and then also keep in mind no Nick Claxton still, no Paul Millsap. Is Blake Griffin somebody who looks at like a good value play to you? I know the production hasn't really been there lately, but once again, it's a different net situation with Joe Harris out.
Yeah, I think it's possible. And, I kind of came into the season with a little bit of a bias that they essentially didn't want to. They basically had a silent minutes cap on players like Griffin for most games. Maybe it goes out the window in a competitive game against the Warriors. But, we do see him hit 27, 28 minutes sometimes. He hit 31 minutes earlier this month. So it's possible here that with Harris out, we see him get a boost here. On a points per minute for a big, he's only so, it's like 0.8 points per minute, 0.82 this season, or excuse me, 0.87 this season. I think you can make an argument for him. I just feel like him getting to a ceiling game is kind of difficult unless you see a huge boost in minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still getting there. I think there is potential for the big boost in minutes. Not that he goes out and plays 30, 35 or anything like that, but he's reasonably priced on both FanDuel and DraftKings, and still, I think 26 minutes from Blake Griffin is probably enough for him to be a strong, like lower owned. I'm trying to think of the right word, just like lower middle tier value play. I'm not thinking that he goes out and scores 50 fantasy points or anything like that, but I think there's a good chance he scores like 25 to 30 and ends up in the optimal lineup from that kind of output.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense too. And you're seeing him pop, and like his boom score is like 6th among forwards, 3rd among centers on FanDuel, pretty much the same on DraftKings, just a little bit lower here. So especially at that lower salary, if he gets a boost, he just has to be somewhat efficient and he could end up optimal. You're right.
All right, so we still have the centers to talk about, but I also want to hit on some of the odd shopper stuff and the giveaway we're doing. And I'm looking at some of the tweets that are coming in to me, and it looks like one of the players that's popping up most frequently that people are adding me on is Keldon Johnson. So that's good. We really like Keldon Johnson in DFS. Well, guess what? People like betting on Keldon Johnson's player props also. Keldon Johnson's over-under for rebounds is 6.5. We have the over hitting 72% of the time over on Odd Shopper. It's a 38% expected ROI. I have Keldon Johnson projected for, let's see, where do I have Keldon Johnson rebounds at? I have Keldon Johnson Keldon Johnson right around 7.5 rebounds. So I certainly like the over on 6.5. I agree with some of the data we have on the site. A lot of people tweeting at me, they're on Keldon Johnson today. How do you feel about that over under 6.5 rebounds?
I'll get there. I think he's just going to have enough playing time to just get there easily. The matchup, again, is just not something I'm really scared of at all. In fact, I think that the great chance for a pace of play, both teams, top 10 in pace of play. So when you just consider the minutes projection and the fact that they should be playing quickly, I think you should be getting plenty of opportunities for boards.
Yeah, and then transitioning over to center, one thing else I've noticed, a lot of people are tweeting me about Drew Eubanks over 6.5 rebounds. That's another prop we have hitting about 70% of the time. And another guy I've projected over 7 rebounds for Drew Eubanks. Now in my lineups, I'm also getting to Drew Eubanks more so on DK than FanDuel, because FanDuel I find him a little bit harder to get into lineups just due to him only having center eligibility. He's $5,300 on FanDuel. DK though, Drew Eubanks, and there's a little bit of correlation here, right? If it projects well for us, the over on the rebounds props for guys like Keldon Johnson and Drew Eubanks, the chances are projections are just higher on these individual players than the market, which would make them good DFS plays. Also a good reason to go look at some of the projections. We have the odds props, and you could see some stuff that correlates to DFS play. But Drew Eubanks, the over 6.5 looks like a good bet. And I'm also getting to him as a value play on DraftKings at 4,400. Is he in your player pool?
Yeah, he sure is. And it's almost the exact same reasons as we were talking about. I think the pace of play is good. The defense doesn't, I mean, the Clippers defense has been strong. I just don't think it's going to end up there overall at by season's end. I think that Eubanks, the position eligibility makes it tough, but I still have him in over 20% of lineups on both DraftKings and FanDuel. I'm basically right with the field here with a little bit more. Yeah, no, more on DraftKings for sure.
Yeah, and by the way, correction, he does have power forward eligibility also on FanDuel. When I was looking at my screen, though, because he was not one of my most rostered players at the power forward position, he just wasn't popping up on the screen for me. But yeah, once again, Drew Eubanks, much more of an important play for me on DK than FanDuel. 4,400 on DK, 5,300 on FanDuel. So not a lot of him over on FanDuel for me, but DK is definitely where he stands out at that at the 4,400 salary. But if you're paying up at center, is there anybody that really stands out to you? Rudy Gobert, somewhat popular today. We have him projected for, let me bring up the most recent ownership here. Rudy Gobert, 32.6% on DK. On FanDuel, he is currently projected for 33.1% ownership. I'm a little bit underweight to that number, but where do you stand with Gobert?
I have a ton of Gobert on DraftKings. I'm taking a stand on Gobert, and I'm having taking a ton of shots, particularly on DraftKings. I think I can get there. I have nearly double the field, which is scaring me, but it's a situation where I want to be a part of this game, where I think that Utah could theoretically dominate. Philadelphia's defensive rating just 23rd in the league, while Utah's offense is ranked second. Utah's net rating is third. I know it's a slower pace of play, but I think I'm going to get a ton of Gobert, and I have some on FanDuel, just not as much.
Yeah, it's once again, I think that Rudy Gobert is a really good cash play, and he rates out as good points per dollar play for me, but a little bit too popular in my opinion. There's other players that I like to pay up for on the slate. Like I mentioned, I'm getting to a lot of Paul George, a lot of, Matt just left. I don't know where he went, but he went somewhere. Is he on camera right now, Jordan? This is exciting. Is he going to come back with a hat on? Oh, he's back. I was confused. No, I was confused. I was just like, where did Matt go? I have no problem. I have no problem doing 40 minutes by myself, but I was like,
yeah, no, I had to go grab another hat. There was a commotion in the hallway, going to wrangle my dog and get the door. We're back. We're good. We're talking about centers. Everything's fine.
Missed opportunity for you to come back with wig on, by the way. That would have blown chat up if you came back with like a big Ronald McDonald wig on. This place would have lit on fire. But all right, center plays. We've only got 9 minutes to go here until lock. We've talked about a lot of these guys. I know you said Isaiah Hartenstein you're really high on. You're getting to a bunch of Gobert. So are there any centers that you have not yet mentioned that are going to be important plays for you?
Yeah, we mentioned Eubanks, we mentioned Hartenstein. I do have some Draymond Green here. I just think in a competitive game, we could see Draymond Green play even more minutes than he has recently. And both on FanDuel and DraftKings, I think that 67K and 6,400 are reasonable salaries. It's one of those situations where if the minutes comes up, then I think that he's going to be a solid points per dollar producer, and then he'll be a solid value at his salary. It's not something that I need to be way over the field, but I definitely am with the field on both sites with Green right now.
Yeah, and you and I, when we did that show the other day, I talked about Draymond Green, and he didn't have a bad fantasy game. He didn't have a good fantasy game either. He was, really neutral. He was 6,200. He scored like 31 fantasy points, like one of the most neutral results possible. But one thing I pointed out that I liked about him the other day is it was a game against the Charlotte Hornets that was projected to be competitive, and the Nets have the Warriors have not played in very many competitive games this year. That was a competitive game. Draymond Green played 32 minutes. It was the most amount of minutes he had played in like 2.5 weeks. And this is another game that should be pretty competitive. We've got the spread in this game. Nets favored by 3. These are two of the best teams in the NBA, the Nets and the Warriors. This should be a really good game to watch. Should be really competitive. You and I are going to be sweating it together in the first 30 minutes of the Jock Market show after this. And I've got my setup here. I've got a separate screen where I'm going to be able to watch it on.
I gotta get a fancy setup like this, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, I don't have any. Jordan sent me a picture of his setup. This Jordan's got like 30 screens in front of him. It's crazy, but the key point here to me with Draymond Green, though, is just I think a lot of people are underestimating how many minutes he might play today, because a lot of people are looking at, okay, look at Draymond Green's minutes, 28, 21, 22, 24. It's like, yeah, the Warriors won one of those games by 1,000,000 points. This should be a close game. I expect him to play over 30 minutes. So Draymond Green, I'm on board with him. Are you overweight to the field on him?
I am overweight to the field. And honestly, I think it's viable to play lineups that sort of go with the game that we all want, the entertaining back and forth shootout game that is in the range of outcomes for both these teams. You could see it. I don't know if I want to say that that's how a median projection should play out, but you can certainly see a situation where Curry's going off, Durant and Harden are going off, and then when they do have to kick it out and there's inevitable misses, you're seeing the bigs rack up tons of periphery points here. So I just think that in general, like if you're talking about a game stack, it might be my second favorite game on a 3-game slate to game stack, but I do think the ceiling range of outcomes for these players is incredibly high.
So what's your favorite game to stack? I only have 2 games to choose from, so I have a feeling I would guess it. If I was to go on a limb, I would say it is the Clippers-Spurs game based on other players that we've talked about. So why is that your favorite game to stack then?
2 fast-paced teams. The defensive rating of the Clippers doesn't scare me off enough to say that to move away from the pace. Highly projected players, decent projected minutes, and also some uncertainty to the fact where I can just mix and match these players who all seem decent values, and it just gives me a lot of optionality in my lineups, particularly the late swap options too. Make it that all that extra goodness. I'm definitely going to have the most from that game.
All right. By the way, if anybody has any questions, fire those in. We're going to be able to hit on a couple of those in the last few minutes of the show. Also, we're going to be sticking around for 30 minutes. Jock Market show after this, but still, any breaking news that happens, you guys want to stick around. There's going to be stuff that could potentially impact FanDuel and DraftKings. Maybe Terence Mann gets ruled out in the next 30 minutes, and we could certainly be covering that as well. Any centers that we've not yet mentioned that you think we should be hitting on?
Yeah, we hit Blake, we hit Draymond, Gobert. We've talked a little bit about Andre Drummond getting 20% ownership. I have basically right with the field. He's had pretty good stat lines recently and playing over 30 minutes in the last 4 games. They just need to rely on him with Embiid out. I think it also affects the game flow of that game as well. If Embiid was in, I think you got to change how you feel about some of these Utah guards even. But with him out, you know, he's a fine producer, Drummond on his own. He's not a priority. I will say that we have him projected for 1.28 fantasy points per minute, which is really, really high for centers. I think it's a little bit bullish, even though he has been producing pretty much at that level over the last 10 games.
All right. And here we have a super chat from Chad Birch, who's asking Bruce Brown or Drew Eubanks. He already has Durant and Mills single entry. So actually, for me, this is Eubanks for a couple of reasons. Number one, I have Eubanks projected higher than Bruce Brown. But then number 2, also, you already have Durant and Mills. And I like being able to get another player for cheap in that lineup who maybe isn't a Brooklyn Net. So I prefer Eubanks to Bruce Brown. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, it's really the same reason. I don't need to have that big of a game stack here. And Eubanks is a great play on his own on both sites. So I'm going to go with the projections there as well.
Yeah. Certainly one of my favorite plays on the slate. Drew Eubanks, talked about him at length. Let me see if there's anybody that really stands out to me from an ownership perspective we've not yet brought up on the show. Nick Batum has really gone up in ownership, and I'm assuming this is because a lot of people are assuming that Terence Mann isn't going to play. But here's the most recent run of ownership, man. I'm gonna ask for your reaction to it. We have where'd the ownership tab go? I have too many tabs up on my screen sometimes. Here we go. All right, most recent run of ownership. Nick Batum projected for 30% ownership on DK. On FanDuel, Nick Batum is projected for 20% ownership, and that's at a 6,000 price tag. So a lot of people seem to be building their lineups as if Terence Mann isn't going to play. What do you think of all this ownership that's now going to Nick Batum?
I don't think our tools and projections like it very much. I mean, I think it changes obviously if Mann is out, but whenever I see a leverage score at -7% on DraftKings, man, like you have to have a really high projection or a game scenario, a game script that goes so completely well for you. How does he have that here? I just don't see it. I'm just gonna go. We only have one. We have 6 players with a leverage score under -7. He's one of them. I just, it's one thing when it's Kevin Durant, right? And you can get contrarian with the other parts of your lineup because the ceiling game is in there. I just don't see it with Batum. I guess he could get hot as a shooter and then it works, but there's nothing in the tools that says we got to play him this week.
It's very dependent on Terence Mann being out to me. If Terence Mann plays, I have no interest in Nick Batum, particularly at that ownership. So once again, we got another 30 minutes coming up. We're going to be sticking around talking about Jock Market. By the way, guys, if you're on your way out, I think you guys should stay, but if you are heading out, like the video on the way out. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You never know when you might get crazy surprises, like somebody taking their hat off. This is the stuff that content is made of, right? You think you're right. You think you're coming here to watch basketball. It's like, oh my God, this guy's taking his hat off. I've never seen anything so crazy. But all right, 1 minute to go until the main slate locks. Matt, who is the player who is going to most significantly impact your lineups today? Who do you need to do well?
Let's go, Rudy Gobert. I have too much of you, but I'm ready to roll. He just looks great from a projection standpoint. I'm taking a stand.
So for me, it's Kevin Durant. He's the pay up option I got to most frequently. And I would like Kevin Durant to have a big game tonight, especially because if I'm getting to a lot of him, it kind of limits the amount of guys like Harden and Curry I'm getting to. I would say the thing that is most likely to go poorly for me and is in a realistic realm of outcome is like Steph Curry or James Harden going for 70 fantasy points. That would be bad news for me. Which player are you going to be rooting against while we're watching these games today?
Yeah, Steph Curry is the one that burns me here, well under the field, and we know what the ceiling is for him. If he gets hot, I'm not going to be running hot.
Yeah, that's and which, by the way, very, very much within the range of outcomes. Wouldn't be surprising if it happens, but just not ultimately where I went with my lineups. There's a lot of value at guard. I ended up paying up at forward. All right, guys, main slate locked. Everybody, good luck today, but we are not going anywhere. Next 30 minutes, we're going to be talking about some Jock Market. What is Jock Market? Different way to play daily fantasy sports. They have an app you could download. You can make a deposit using the promo code Awesemo. They get you a $50 bonus on your first deposit. And also they have daily fantasy sports contests that operate like a stock market. So the IPO period is already ended, but you could still buy, sell, and trade players after the games have already started. And so that's something that Matt and I could do right now is we could pull up the Jock Market app and we could start to look through what some of the ask prices are for these players. Also, if you look at this and you're kind of overwhelmed, it's like, how do I know how much to bid for any individual NBA player? Well, we have free projections over at awesemo.com that I'm going to pull up right now, and they will tell you what the fair IPO price is for some of these players. So right away, I'm going to open up the Jock Market app, and I didn't have time to look at it while we were doing the show because we were doing a show. I was building my lineups, getting them submitted and all that. Yeah, hey, it happens. It's hard to, it's funny. Somebody had said during the show, how come Greg always looks like he's thinking while he's on a show? It's like, because I'm reading chat, I'm reading Discord, I'm trying to have a conversation, I'm trying to update my lineups, trying to update projections. It's a lot going on. There are times where I am thinking, and that might be surprising to many, but there's something going on underneath all this hair. All right, Jock Market. Oh, not a hat. I don't own any hats. All right, so I'm pulling. Today is the 16th. I want to make sure I had the right slate up. All right, so which play do you have the Jock Market projections up or not?
I do, yeah.
Okay, so that would be cheating. I'll ask, which player do you think has the highest ask price of any player in the lobby right now? So which player is the field asking for the most money for shares of?
I would like to think I would have gotten it right anyway, or I would have gotten it down to one of three. I think if everyone just like puts their thinking cap on, if you got one, and they got three from this slate, they would probably get to Curry, Harden, or Durant. We do see Durant currently with the highest fair IPO asking price.
No. I was going to ask the field. Who is the field asking for the most money per share of? The answer is Steph Curry, by the way. You were looking at our projection. So you didn't have.
I was looking at our projections. I didn't have it
Yeah.
up, and I ended up getting it right anyway. Cool.
No, you got it wrong. You said Durant. It was Curry.
All right.
Oh
Maybe I
my
should just
God.
try going again.
Oh my God. All right. Reset. Gonna make you put a hat on soon here. So do you have Jock Market pulled out?
I'm getting there.
Okay. If not, I was just going to ask you about some of the IPO prices and which players you thought potentially looked like they were underpriced that we could place some bids on. But I'll ask you about some of these players, because one thing that does stand out to me, the current asking price on James Harden is $15.27 a share. We have the fair IPO price for James Harden at $17.40. So there's a little bit of value to Harden, but it's not, some kind of massive gap. Would you be willing to place a bid on James Harden to try to get him at $15.27 per share?
Yeah, I think if we have like such a large differential there, that's a solid percentage difference. Then we're just going to go with the math there. And this is one of those places where we can hedge in our DFS lineups where Harden wasn't a priority play for me. But when I see that much of a differential there, I'm just going to go ahead and take it, even if it is a star player, knowing that could really fluctuate with one ceiling game as well. I'm definitely going to go for it there.
All right. So now we've got, by the way, also now this is where things get a little bit dicey, because as we're talking, I see the basketball game started and I am trying to pull up the stream on my second screen over here and see if I'm able to make this work without just the sound like blaring through my ears to the point where I can't hear anything and it ruins everything else. But all right. So let's talk about the Terence Mann situation, because we currently have Terence Mann projected for a fair IPO price of $590. Nick Batum, who we talked about being really popular on the DFS slate, he currently has a fair IPO price of $7.70. How would you be looking to approach these guys on Jock Market?
I don't know if I'm prioritizing them right now, but I almost wonder if Terence Mann is the choice here, where people are going against him simply because they're scared of the questionable tag. But if he does play here, I think he's a solid choice. We know that they do rely on him for solid minutes, and it doesn't look like fantastic value, but I wonder if that's the one that people are going to be off of quickly.
Yeah, let's see. Oh my God, it's working. And I could actually hear everything that you're saying. And there we go. I've got it up on my second screen. Oh, this is very exciting.
Nice.
All right. I was very dubious that I was going to be able to figure this out. By the way, there's no way I'm looking at you the rest of the show, Matt. There's zero chance I'm making eye contact with you. One thing, though, is I'm going to be a little bit behind the audience if anybody's watching at the same time while we're doing the watch along, because number one, we're already streaming on YouTube, which is a little bit behind. But then also when you're streaming the game on the computer through the NBA app, that's also something that's a little bit behind. So just for reference, I'm kind of curious. Do you have the game up in front of you, Matt?
I do. And I now have my app open. I now have about 80 billion tabs. I have my lineups open. I have never been at this level of tabs. Now my phone is blaring at me. This is so exciting. We're clearly in the jock market at this point.
Yeah, so
beautiful jumper.
Where I'm at in the game right now, there's the game isn't in action, but we've got Bruce Brown shooting free throws, nets up 7-5, 10 minutes left. So I'm just kind of curious if we get people to sync here. A couple dribbles by Bruce Brown, and he bricked the free throw. So that's where I'm at, in case anybody's wondering where I'm at. Are you behind or ahead of me?
I am slightly behind.
Okay, so there we go. I'm sorry I spoiled it. I probably ruined the game for you.
That's just fine.
All right. And already we've got the chat saying, wow, James Harden going off. Jordan K saying they got to retire Bruce Brown's number after tonight. All right. So what are the actual stats for this game? What is what's going on from a stats perspective, and is there any kind of advantage to exploit on jock market? One thing I do notice is, have you ever noticed this, Matt, that every once in a while the DFS community could be a little fickle from time to time?
What do we just take narratives and run? Is that something that we do? I didn't know that.
It's so the reason I bring this up is every once in a while there's somebody gets off to a fast start in a basketball game and everybody kind of assumes this guy's going to break the slate. And then also we've got a situation where on the other side, somebody has 2 bad minutes to open a game and everybody kind of panics. So I do always find it a little interesting to look at jock market and see, are there any players who have gotten off to starts that maybe we could exploit on a market where people are currently buying and selling players. So is there anybody who's off to a cold start in this game? And keep in mind, we're only 2.5 minutes in, that you think should turn around their game and maybe we should be looking to buy low on them on jock market right now?
Ooh, this is early. This is early, but
It is early.
We've seen KD hit 1 shot. We've seen Curry quiet. Do you say that is Curry down a little bit? I'm seeing even at the start. But I don't know. I think maybe it is Curry at this point. Maybe Jordan Poole. Oh, he just had a nice layup. Since I'm behind, it's even tougher. Got to pull up the stats.
Yeah. So here's something I'd be looking out for, and we can move past that point. But foul situation: Draymond Green has a foul. Kevon Looney has a foul. Jordan Poole has a foul. Over the Nets, Bruce Brown has a foul. Blake Griffin has a foul. So there is already a situation. We are seeing guys potentially in foul trouble really early in this game. If somebody picks up a second foul as Kevin Durant knocks down a jumper from the top of the key, I think there are players we could look to and be like, hey, if Blake Griffin picks up a second foul really quick here, let's try to buy shares with Lamarcus Aldridge. He's got extra minutes going his way. Over on the Warriors side of the game, if Draymond Green picks up a second foul, maybe Bielitsa or Iguodala comes off the bench and plays extra minutes. So these are the things that I'm really looking to take advantage of that I think really does make sense, because, whatever, somebody scores a point or two in a couple minutes in the game, doesn't matter all that much. Foul trouble could have a significant impact on the game. So how does that make you potentially approach some of these players?
I think that's a great way of looking at it. I still, in general, I want to go with players who can get big swings, like big swings in scoring and therefore big swings in their value here. So I do tend to sometimes overvalue stars, I guess. And that's one area where I could be a little bit better, especially when it comes to early foul trouble. But in general, like I'm just going for jump shooters who I know have a solid true shooting percentage, but just haven't been strong to start games. That's generally where I've looked before, but I really like that call about getting players who aren't in the game, but could easily be in for extra minutes if fouls get in the way.
Yeah. And by the way, still the foul situation, by the way, crazy pass by Steph Curry down low right there to Draymond Green. There we go. Draymond Green on the board. That's his first bucket of the game. He's not going to score 0 fantasy points today. Everybody breathe a sigh of relief. And there we go. Is that a second foul on Kevin Looney on Kevin Looney? I didn't see. I couldn't tell with the sound off who they called it on. Is that 2 on Looney?
I'm behind you. Remember.
All right. Well, I see Looney appears aggrieved as he's standing with his hands up in the air like this, as if so. That's usually a clear sign that something is
all right.
On a
I think that's a good sign.
All right. So let's see who comes in for Looney. Assuming Looney checks out right here, let's see who comes in. And right away, I think that's something we might want to go get shares of over on Jock Market if Looney checks out. Did they leave Looney in? It is,
which is the right thing to do.
Yeah, it would, except he sucks. So it's not like it matters.
Yeah, all right, that's fair. That's fair.
It's not like it's like how much is the game changing because Kevin Looney comes in or out, but it looks like he's staying in, or did he come out? I had my head turned. Looney. Okay, Looney's still in. All right, so there's no advantage to be gained there. Here I go. I get this whole thing. I do this whole preamble into like there's going to be value here if somebody gets into foul trouble, and then Looney picks up 2 fouls and stays in the game and no advantage gain, so it doesn't even matter. So that aside, with the current fantasy leaders in this game, we've got Steph Curry now, 3 points, 2 assists, 2 steals. Everybody who was tilting the Steph Curry, who was poo-pooing on Steph Curry early. Look at that. He's having a great game now with 3 points, 2 assists,
Balling,
and 2 steals. Absolutely going off, breaking the slate in the first 4 minutes of the game. And by the way, still waiting on news for Terence Mann in the later sections of the game. I'm going to read off. So don't forget, we've got that giveaway that we're doing over on Twitter. Now, the games have already started, so we can't get submissions at this point for the free month of Awesemo Plus over at OddsShopper. But I do want to shout out some people that have tweeted at me and see what kind of prop bets are on. Actually, I'm going to look see if we have any ones from the Nets-Warriors game. I might as well bring this up over here. Ben P, he bet the over on Devin Vassell, or as you call him, Devin Vasily.
Vasily, you gotta
over 3.5 rebounds for Devin Vassell. Ben P took that one. We've got, let's see, where can I find Nets Warriors prop bet? And here we go. DeAndre Bembry. We've got under 6.5 points at plus odds. That was Philip Still. And game just went to commercial. That's why the thing changed on my screen there. So he's got under 6.5 for DeAndre Bembry. Bembry's an interesting one because the minutes are so variant today without Joe Harris in the mix, and he's not starting. We know that the game's already started. Patty Mills has started. But how do you view some of these DeAndre Bembry props? We have them rated pretty well, but keeping in mind too that if we're just off here by a couple of minutes, all of a sudden the unders don't look really good. How would you be looking to approach some of the props of these players where it's so dependent on minutes because of an injury and we're not exactly sure what the playing time is going to be?
Yeah, in general, that is the key mark for me is if I have more of confidence in their minutes projection. And remember, we can look at something like a standard deviation of a player's minutes or something. Just variance in general is something we want to pay attention to. But that is one of the deal breakers for me. I will say if our tool is way, way different than my projections, I sometimes see to the tools just because I know the amount of work that goes into these tools. If it is a huge expected ROI, I'll either go back to my stats and see why that might be happening. But just like you mentioned, if there is fluctuation in playing time affecting these stats, that's usually one of the reasons I may stay away from a bet. Whereas if I know the minutes are solid, then I can just see, well, does it line up with the efficiency I project for that player?
Yeah, and so the reason the minutes in this spot are hard to project, though, is because Joe Harris hasn't missed a game this year. So that's where the situation is different. When you're making projections and you're doing with NBA, a lot of teams are easy. A lot of teams is, hey, this guy played 30 minutes last game. He's going to play 30 minutes this game. Where we throw a monkey wrench into things is when a key player like Joe Harris gets ruled out for the Nets. So, like, how many minutes did you give to DeAndre Bembry today? I have him with 18.
Pulling them up. Yeah, 19.1 is what I have.
Oh, okay. That's a very specific number. You got like seconds in there. So
just
Excel I was like, well, that's very specific. So the thing is, when a player's projected so low, by the way, I do like the under on points for DeAndre Bembry per my projections. However, I also kind of acknowledge that I haven't projected for 18 points. Maybe plays 22 with Joe Harris out. And then all of a sudden, that's so many extra minutes relative to just the overall percentage we have. If he's playing 22 minutes instead of the 18 I gave him, we're looking at like 20% extra minutes. And then you're boosting all his projections by 20%. And that would drastically change how you view some of his props. So personally, I tend to stay away from some of those just because it's so reliant on a minutes projection that I'm kind of just guessing.
That's exactly how I feel. I would rather be betting on efficiency, particularly when I'm betting unders. I just say, oh, this player certainly has a chance of being more inefficient than they have been, especially in recent weeks. If players on a heater, that's when I typically love to go with unders. It's really annoying in situations where you bet on a prop and then the player gets drastically more minutes. They don't even play well and they still crush the prop. So I guess that's what I'm trying to avoid.
All right. So we've got Looney out. So we finally got a substitution. Let's see. Bielitsa, the fair jock market price that we have for him is $390. The asking price on Bielitsa is $335 on jock market. And considering the foul trouble for Looney and that Bielitsa checked in, I'm going to try to get some shares of Bielitsa. I think this is a good buy low option. I think there's a little bit of upside here. Does that make sense to you?
Oh yeah, this is just a solid value grind here. Not sexy, but I really dig it. Yeah, the 3.9. Yeah, our projection for him is pretty meh. But again, just like we talked about, if those minutes spike, then the projection goes out the window.
All right, there we go. I've got Bielitsa. I got some shares of him, and then something else. Let's see. There's a stoppage right there. Did somebody else get called for a foul? Not that I see. I think it might have just been a deflection. All right. So either way, we've got the score, at least on my screen, is 20-16. Kevin Durant currently, he is being guarded by the Mitten. One of the all-time great nicknames in NBA is Gary Payton's son. Gary Payton was the glove. Gary Payton's son is the Mitten. One of my favorite nicknames. He's currently on the court right now. He's also played extremely well as of late. Andrew Wiggins just bricked a shot. Looks like it was rebounded by Bruce Brown. All right, so Bielitsa, I've got my shares of him in here. Let's see if maybe I'll buy some more shares of Bielitsa.
If Curry's already going off a little bit.
Oh yeah, Curry. Well, it's still a situation of, all right, so Curry's going well, but could we get more fantasy points out of guys like Kevin Durant or Paul George than Steph Curry? That's ultimately where I think my lineups are going to kind of come down to here. Where's the game out on your screen right now? What's happening? I've got Blake Griffin shooting free throws.
Yeah, I'm behind. It's 20-16. Just saw a brick by Wiggins, so I'm like a solid 20 seconds behind you.
You're really.
I'm trying to get a better
really
link here. I know.
Yeah, it is. So Blake Griffin's attempting his second free throw right now on my screen. He made the first one. Sorry to spoil it for you, but yeah, Blake Griffin dribbling, looks at the ball, and all right, 2 for 2 at the free throw line for Blake Griffin. Nice little start for Blake Griffin as a potential value play there. We've got Josh Gillum in the YouTube chat saying take Blake Griffin shares. Look at Blake Griffin. Let's see where he's at, and maybe I'll let chat spend my money. All right, so we have Blake Griffin.
Let's see some 65, yeah.
Oh, I'm not buying shares of Blake Griffin over $6. So sorry, I was gonna let somebody spend my money for me, but I'm not buying shares of Blake Griffin when the asking price is $6.12. So all right, now we've got Josh Gillum saying take Bruce Brown shares. Where's Bruce Brown at? Bruce Brown over on the jock market is, by the way, maybe that is a fun segment for us to do. Is if we just had like a community account here that you guys just controlled, where I just buy stocks and sell stocks of players based on whatever YouTube chat tells me to do. Maybe something
that actually
to keep in
be
mind
pretty cool.
Yeah, just thinking up ideas on the fly here. That could be a future jock market idea. But Bruce Brown. All right, we've got chat is saying go buy shares of Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown is 11.5 jock market fantasy points in the first quarter. The asking price is $8.19 for Bruce Brown. So for reference, Bruce Brown, just for a little insight on how the payouts and scoring work over on Jock Market, to return value on Bruce Brown's current market price, you need him to be the 13th best scoring player on the slate or better. A little rich for me. I don't know if I think Bruce Brown's going to be that high scoring. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we have him projected amongst the top 20 players on this small slate.
Yeah, but you need him to be 13. You need him 13th or better.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, the ceiling, is that really there? Is that really what he's there to do in a game against Golden State? I don't really think so. He could stuff the stat sheet in different ways with, defensive plays like blocks and steals, but I'm not sure I want to bet on that, especially when he's not a super cheap value right now. It's sort of a mid-range value.
By the way, Steph Curry looks very aggrieved on the bench. I don't know what it is that he's upset about, but is he asking to come back in? Okay, so Steph Curry had checked out. He's coming back in. The Warriors having a little bit of a hard time keeping up with the Nets, particularly when Steph Curry's off the court. Now, I'm going to look at the plus-minus numbers here, but at least it feels like the Warriors just got crushed in the minutes without Steph. Now they got outscored by 3 points. It appeared worse just based on the eye test than what it actually was. But Steph is checked back in for the end of the first quarter. James Harden gets to the rack, easy bucket for him. So James Harden this year has not been nearly as aggressive going to the basket. But I think a lot of it has been hesitancy on his part just because of the change in the free throw rules. And I think he's been a little bit wary of, hey, am I going to get contact and not draw a foul? James Harden, I think, is going to be fine going forward. Steph Curry, by the way, knocks down a deep three. How do you think that James Harden is going to adjust going forward? Is he going to be able to get back to the player that he was before, Matt? Or is he just always going to be a little bit less efficient because of the change in the way that that some of the foul baiting rules are being called?
Okay, this is tough because this is narrative driven. I'm not going to be bringing tons of stats into this, but I think they changed the rule because of the way James Harden kind of broke basketball for a moment there. So I don't think it's ever going to be quite like that. That said, he's incredibly crafty. He's got great footwork. He plays a ton of minutes. He's on a strong team. He's going to have every chance to perform. If you look at the underlying, he's not first among all guards on this small slate in usage, but he's still sixth. He's still seventh in true shooting percentage. He's still third among all guards on this slate in fantasy points per minute over the last 10 games. It's just not the number one overall player that we've seen before. And it can sometimes be jarring. I don't think he gets back to that level, but can he be a consistent slate breaker, especially if Durant misses any time? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, for sure, if Durant misses time, especially with Kyrie currently out with his situation, then it would be all James Harden show. Let's see, what are we doing now in terms of no news yet on Terence Mann? So situation we're probably not going to know. 7 minutes to go until the show ends. Guys, do us a favor if you're not done so already. Matt and I have been spending a night with you guys, and I'm having a pretty good time. Chat's been on fire today, especially with everybody judging everybody's haircut. We've got 7 minutes left in the show. Do us a favor, like this video, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've got all content coming up for all different DFS sports. I kind of like doing these. Maybe we'll find a way to do these more extended and also build in some of the other content, doing watch alongs. Now that I've got my second screen set up here, so I can just watch games while we're doing it. I'm enjoying this. John Wick is in the YouTube chat saying he guesses Lamarcus Aldridge is not playing in this game. So keep in mind with Lamarcus Aldridge, he's not been playing that many minutes recently. He's been crazy on a points per minute basis.
So efficient, like too efficient to keep going.
But if you're concerned that he's not in the game right now, then you've played Lamarcus Aldridge for the wrong reason. He's not going to go out and play 30 minutes. Lamarcus Aldridge, the last handful of games, 17 minutes, 21, 17, 23, 22, 22, 22. So that's where I have him projected for his 22 minutes. What you're really hoping for is he just comes out and he hits all of his shots again, like he's done in every other game recently where I haven't played him enough. But what did you do with Marcus Aldridge's minutes? And are you concerned if you were somebody who was rostering Lamarcus Aldridge, would you be concerned that he's not checked into the game yet?
No, I'm not concerned at all. But I am concerned that the efficiency numbers are still fluctuating. Again, it's almost the same exact conversation we had about player props being very dependent on a player's minutes. I did project him for about 22 minutes. So that's basically in line with his last 10-minute average of 20.6. I just think that would I be surprised if I saw him be on a hot streak and then suddenly be left in the game for a longer stint and then suddenly hit 25 or 26? Sure, but I think he could clank a few shots and suddenly be back down at 19. And I'd be like, oh, okay, great. This is a 1.2 fantasy point per minute producer that didn't play enough minutes to really give me any valuable production. It's just a lot of high variance here.
Yeah, and I'd be concerned too, because I've seen John Wick kill Boban Marjanovic in a library before, right? And now you start to wonder, like, all right, what is he going to do if Lamarcus Aldridge doesn't get playing time? You know, there are things that John Wick could resort to force Lamarcus Aldridge to get more playing time after seeing what he did to Boban. So
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's an argument to be made that John Wick did that just to improve his DFS lineups for the day. Is that a conspiracy theory we can get behind?
I'm 100% behind it. And he doesn't own a hat either.
Yeah, no, he had a bunch of Dwight Powell that day. And he was like, hey, I need to get my 20 fantasy points out of Dwight Powell. The only way to do that is to off Boban with a book in the library. By the way, I hope I didn't spoil John Wick 3 for everybody, but that's the plot of the entire movie is John Wick kills Boban to find good value in his DFS lineups for the day. So we've got about 4 minutes left to go here. If anybody has any questions, fire them into the Discord chat, fire them into the YouTube chat, and I will certainly get to anything I can over on Jock Market. Let's see who looks good relative to our fair IPO prices in the later game. All right, I've got my pricing pulled up. Is there who's somebody who really stood out to you in DFS from by the way, the asking price on Bruce Brown Curly, $9.41. Steph Curry's asking price all the way up to $19.76 after the hot start for Steph Curry, 21.5 fantasy points over in the Jock Market scoring. Who's a value play that you want me to check for you over in the late games? And we could close out by that. We could find some of our favorite value plays in the late games over on Jock Market, and we'll see how they look from a fair IPO pricing perspective.
I dig it. What's Gobert looking like? I know he's not a value play per se, but he's someone that I'm super on. So let's see where he's going right now.
Rudy Gobert. The asking price on him right now is $12.50.
Oof. All right.
It's about fair. A little low maybe, but not enough for me to want to go buy shares of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sometimes that's annoying, but sometimes it's just like, don't buy, don't sell. Just don't do it.
All right. Let's see. Anybody else how could we not close the show with Eric Bledsoe? We have to. We've got about 90 seconds left here. I would be remiss if I did not talk about Eric Bledsoe, who is a staple of everything I talk about. Eric Bledsoe. He has a fair IPO price projection for us at $8.40. I almost said 18, which would certainly not be the case. He on Jock Market.
I see him at 839. You kidding me?
The IPO price, people are asking for 908 though. Yeah, I can't go there with Eric Bledsoe. There's no real value. I know I love Eric Bledsoe, but that's going to be a no-go for me. So not going to be him. Let's see if there is.
Checking Reggie Jackson.
All right, Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson's IPO price currently $7.98. What do we have him projected at? $8.30. Another one pretty fair. No value to be had there.
I'm actually seeing slightly different numbers. I see him at $7.24.
That's not the. You have to look at the ask price. The ask price. Yeah, the ask price in red. That's what people actually want for.
$7.98.
With that said, though, here I'm going to leave people with this bit of wisdom. If Terence Mann is ruled out, buy shares of Nick Batum. We've got Nick Batum would look like a good enough value. And what about is Isaiah Hartenstein in here? Isaiah Hartenstein, that's a little more than you know what? Actually, Isaiah Hartenstein, $4.49. He has a fair IPO price projection for us at $6.10. That's what we're going to say. That's good. That's the value play to give out. There's a little bit of value to be had on Isaiah Hartenstein. That's where I think is a good jumping off point. Everybody, thank you very much for watching today. If you've not done so already, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel because we are going to be back with content basically every day, and we're going to be doing more of these late show slates. So stick around for those in the future as well. Good luck today, guys.